This is the closed meeting of the November 13th meeting of the Board of Directors of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. It is about 10 after 6 right now, and I'll take roll call. Ms. Gillette? Here. Mr. Lloyd? Here. Mr. Toombs? And Ms. Lipscomb?
Here.
And I'm here too, so we have a full house today. And at this time we will, nobody's here from the public, so we'll take no public comments, and we will now go into closed session. Could I look on your agenda? I can't figure out what I did. Thanks. Okay, we ready? Okay, welcome everybody to the November 13th, 2014 meeting of the Board of Directors of the, What's the matter? Like I said, welcome to our meeting tonight, November 13th, 2014, Board of Directors of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. I'm Len Welsh, current president of the board, and at this time I will I'll take roll call. Ms. Gillette? Here. Mr. Lloyd? Mr. Toombs? Here. Ms. Lipscomb?
I'm here.
So we have a full house tonight and a packed audience, which is nice. So first up, I will report out on our closed meeting. We met with legal counsel on the Schwartzberg et al. Versus Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District lawsuit. We gave guidance to our attorney in that discussion and instructed him on how to take further action in that matter. Item 2, we met with our labor negotiators, and no action was taken on that item. I would note that we will be looking at a proposed contract later on this meeting. And on the last item, we had a discussion about the potential contract for the Chief of Police. No action taken on that item. No action taken on any other items. So at this time, I will ask if there are any public comments. These would be comments that are unrelated to actual agenda items. Go ahead.
Good evening. I have 3 things. One of them, well, I don't know if they're minor.
Could you pull the mic?
Okay.
Yeah, kiss that microphone.
This is not designed for average sized people. See, it's designed for people about that tall. Anyway, I appreciated that the candidates who had signs out during the election picked them up almost immediately. On Wednesday after election, I saw one of the candidates at 7 o'clock in the morning collecting the signs, and I thought that was very good. The second thing is, since this is Linda's last meeting, I want to say that I appreciate the things that she has done. There were times when she disagreed with my viewpoint, and that clearly was wrong. But anyway, I appreciate what she has done. Plus, I appreciate that whenever she spoke, it was easy to understand what she was saying. Her voice carries very nicely, which is not the case for every candidate. But anyway, I appreciate what you've done. But the issue that I really care about is the officer's contract. Is there going to be 1 reading? Are there going to be 2 readings? And is the proposed contract going to be shown and discussed at the Finance Committee meeting?
There are 2 readings. The whole idea was to present the contract tonight and vote on it at the next meeting.
and vote at it at the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
That was the idea, and that's what we're
Good.
sticking to.
Okay.
And the issue of presenting it to the Finance Committee meeting, we did not discuss that. We could not present it to anybody beforehand because it was in a draft and it was a subject to negotiation, so you didn't see it. I don't have any strong feeling one way or the other about giving it to the Finance Committee meeting. Giving it to the Finance Committee to look at, I think we have some talking points we're going to walk through tonight that will explain the bulk of the finance aspects of it. I just don't have an opinion one way or the other about giving it to the committee to review.
Well, it'll be there. We can review it if the committee decides it wants to.
Okay, compensation for our sworn officers are almost 90% of our total expenditure. And if the Finance Committee was ever to have any kind of say in things, it clearly ought to be shown to the Finance Committee. But again, this is my viewpoint, and my viewpoint is not always appreciated.
No, you're wrong.
It's always appreciated, just not always agreed with.
Carl, always. You always make us think.
Good evening. I'm Andrew Reed. I just wanted to express a personal note of thank you to Directors Lloyd and Lipscomb that they're retiring. I had the pleasure of serving on a committee for several years with both of them, and I was very impressed by the amount of time and devotion that I saw on the part of the directors. Nobody can hear me back there in the peanut gallery. You guys can hear me, and that's
Pull the
what's important.
microphone real close to you.
Is it working?
There you go.
You have to take the mic out.
Do I have to start over?
That's it. There
Is
you
that better?
go.
I apologize. My name is Andrew Reed, and I wanted to express a personal note of gratitude to the retiring directors Lloyd and Lipscomb, because I had the pleasure of serving with them on a committee for 5 years, and I was very impressed and touched by the level of devotion and time that they spent in their work and their commitment to the community. And so I just wanted to say thank you very much. I really was grateful to get to know you both better, and good luck on whatever you do next. And I'm sure you'll help the community in other ways. Take care.
I have to adjust this for a short person. Good evening. My name is Peter Liddell. I'm with the Kensington Public Safety Council, and I just have a brief change to or correction to the, I guess, the packet on page 48. At the very bottom, it talks about the fuel reduction effort, and the reason this is not correct is because we never told anybody about this change. But our winter hours for that are 2 to 4 p.m. The fuel reduction is an effort somewhat partly sponsored by the Kensington Public Safety Council and partly by the KPPCSD to reduce fuel load around on the parklands around this building and whatnot. And let's see, and so we meet every Thursdays. Summertime, 2 to 5, but for the winter, because it gets dark early, we're only meeting from 2 to 4. And I'd also like to thank retiring Directors Lloyd and Lipscomb for their support of the KPSC through the years that we've all been involved with it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any other comments from the public right now? Okay, maybe before board members comment, maybe this would be a good time to engage in another expression of appreciation for the wonderful service of Linda and Tony. We have plaques here that I would like to present to both of them.
Oh, fancy.
Joel, maybe you could come up here and grab a snapshot.
Oh, my goodness.
Can you two come up in front?
Wow.
Oops, ooh, that was close. So I just want to say that I started here almost 2 years ago, and I have learned so much from Tony and Linda. I mean, I just could not do this job at all. I did not serve to help both of these people getting especially Tony and later on when I worked a lot together, and it's just been one of the most wonderful experiences in my life. I can tell you there are no hard-working people in this and you have no idea how many hours tiny little token of the board's appreciation to Linda and Tony.
You're like a professional at this.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to take this time to thank my colleagues for all of the help and support that they gave me. And I just spilled. I did what you didn't do.
It had to happen.
Luckily, I drunk most of it. And thank you to the members of the public who made it really worthwhile. I mean, there's some people here that are just the backbone of this community, absolutely the backbone. And I could not have done it without that support. And I am deeply, deeply grateful to my colleagues and to the members of the public who have given me that support over the years. You made it worthwhile. Thank you.
Likewise, it's been a very interesting 4 years. Challenging. I came onto the board and basically in retirement from the private sector, and the last 3 months I've actually been on medical leave, but it's been quite a challenge, and the opportunity to work with each and every one of you in many different ways, to watch the city grow that I raised my kids in for 30 years, and to give back a little bit. And that's really what it's all about. Every one of us gives a little bit. We can make a whole lot of big things happen in Kensington. And it's really important that we continue to work together. I also want to thank my colleagues that I worked with for 4 years, and Chief Harmon, who has provided a wonderful leadership from the police and general manager side of the house. It's been a pleasure. So,
Ditto.
lots of love.
Okay, well, board member comment time. Chuck?
I'm just going to thank Tony and Linda for all your hard work. I can't believe you suffered through 4 years and you still came out swinging. Congratulations to both of you and best of luck down the road.
Thank you.
And don't be a stranger. There'll be lots of stuff you can do with us still. Should you want to.
Oh, we're not letting them go. Pat?
So I have a lot to say. You know, the last election cycle that just ended made me realize that a lot of people in our town don't pay attention to what happens at this board, except during election time. And that's your privilege as a citizen of our community. But I really hope this is like the preacher on Easter Sunday, or I suppose it happens in Jewish temples as well, and maybe in mosques. It'd be really nice to see this kind of a turnout at all of our meetings so that people can be informed about what we do as a board. Because month after month we come here and we do our best to make decisions that will be beneficial to the entire community that we represent. Not just the people who appear at the meetings, but everyone who has a voice in this community or who wants to have a voice in this community. And so I'm grateful for the wonderful turnout tonight. And I also want to say something about Tony and Linda, because it became clear to me in this last election cycle just what it's like to be in a situation where there's a lot of hostility and a lot of anger. And they suffered through that for 2 years of their service on the board. It's not fun. It's not pleasurable. If you read my letter in the Outlook a while back, I said I wouldn't trade this experience for anything, and that's true. I wouldn't. But I do hope that people on both sides of the issues, on all sides of the issues, appreciate that people like Tony and Linda, who served for 4 years on this board, have come here with good intention, with good faith, trying to do what they thought was right and what reflected the views of the community. And I applaud them for that. There's a positive side that comes from being on this board, and that is having the opportunity to work with all of you and to hear your views and hear your statements about what you think we should or should not be doing. And Tony and Linda have been invaluable in that process. Tony brought with him corporate experience, which we've all benefited from as he gives us some direction of what it's like from the business person's perspective to consider some of the issues that we're faced with. He brought labor negotiation experience. He brought corporate governance experience. He was often the voice of reason, the calming effect in our closed sessions, which none of you are obviously are part of, where we actually do have disagreement and dissension and discussion and try to reach consensus. And Tony was often the person who was able to bring us together. And so, Tony, I thank you for that and for the contributions that you made to the various issues that we had to decide. Linda, what can you say about Linda? Linda is probably one of the smartest people, no offense to the other people on the board, but one of the smartest people I've ever worked with. She brings skills as a lawyer, as a realtor, as a union negotiator, as a person with incredible life experience, and someone whose intellectual curiosity is never quenched. She loves looking into issues, and were it not for Linda, we would not have a lot of the information that we needed to make certain of the decisions that we've made as a board and that we've made as a community. She's dedicated hours, hundreds of hours of time to looking into issues and making sure that we were certain about the facts or about the proposals that were being made or about the issues that were being raised. And she does that with a sense of humor, with great emotion, but never mistake that emotion for a lack of intellectual depth. Linda has incredible intellectual depth and has shared that with all of us on the board and with us as a community. So we owe both of these people a huge debt of gratitude for the service that they've given to our community, selflessly, and for the hundreds of hours that they've put in, both on this board, both investigating issues that this board has considered, and on the committees on which they've served, which resulted in some of the wonderful things that make us such a terrific community. My hope is that the civility that was brought to this board in the past 2 years with the members who you see before you, who have tried to take our differences of opinion, to talk about them, to fight about them, and then to come out with consensus and collaborative decision making, that will continue with our new board. I'm anxious to work with our new board members, Vanessa and Rochelle, and I hope that they'll come with the same dedication, the same sense of commitment and responsibility that have been exhibited by the two members who are leaving. So many thanks to Linda and Tony for the incredible support and contributions that you've made to our community.
Thank you.
Well, you two are going to be missed. That is for sure. And I guess I'll just follow on to what Pat said with my sincere hope that the new board will be able to work together with the civility, the sense of collaboration and teamwork that we have had since I've been on the board. And I have every expectation that that will be the case. And I'm glad to see a lot of the candidates here. I have to say I got to know each of them a little bit more from the campaign, and I value that experience tremendously. That said, I guess we should hear from staff. Anybody have anything to tell us over there?
Yes, I learned today that we have some challenges with the new website. We will do our level best to make sure that those get corrected and addressed before the next board packet gets put out there. Additionally, we recently upgraded our internet service within the last week, and that should also improve our function. So please keep the comments coming. If you have problems, please don't hesitate to let me know. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really helpful. There's nothing like, the customer getting back to the provider saying, hey, I tried to do this and it didn't work. So we need to hear when things don't work so we can fix it.
The only thing I have, I'm not going to thank Tony and Linda for your service, your hard work. That's already been said, but I just want you both to know that what I'm really thankful for is the friendship that you've provided me the last 4 years. And I couldn't have gotten through this period of time without both of you. And I hope we continue to stay in touch.
Runs two ways, buddy.
Okay. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Carl, are you going to want to comment on the profit and loss report?
Yeah, I'm asking that we remove the financial issues from the consent calendar, and there are 4 items that I am asking the chief to comment on. I'm sorry, I'm not organized.
Why don't we just pull it, Carl, and then we can come back to it after we keep it?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's see what's coming off first, okay?
You mean item D?
Yeah, the profit and loss report, is that it?
Yes.
Okay. So that's coming off. Anything else anybody wants to see pulled from the consent calendar? All right. Do I have a motion?
We actually have to have Carl. We pulled item D, so maybe we can have Carl come.
Oh, okay, that's right, because we'll be able to add it back in. Okay, come on up. Yes, please. Relax, Chuck. Be nice.
It's 594, 530, 564, and on the positive side, 830 and 840.
Ooh, we
Say
got
it
some
again.
positives. Very good.
Yeah, now 3 of them are negative, and 2 of them are positive, and I let some
Challenges. Let's call it
minor
challenges.
things go. So
564, 594, is that what you said?
594, 530, and 564.
Well, don't we want to have that discussion now?
Carl, could you
Come on up.
what your concerns were?
Go ahead and tell us what you want to say about those items. Can you come up, please, to the mic?
I'm missing one. 530, 564, 594.
They are all large variances. Year-to-date budget against actual expenditures, and I think they deserve to be commented on.
Okay, can we take the first one first?
Okay?
Workers' comp,
Which number?
530.
530, okay. What's your comment on that?
Oh, I don't want to comment on it. I'd like the chief to comment on it. Why we have variances on those 5 items? I mean, you know what my feeling is on that when it comes to expenditures. I think most people know what my feeling is on that.
Are we talking 4 items or 5?
We're talking 5 items.
Okay, I have 530, 594, 564.
594, 830, and 840.
Okay, there we go. All right.
830.
Chief, did you get enough to comment on there, or do you need more from him?
I'll try. Okay, Mr. Kruger's talking about 530, which is our workers' comp insurance premium. And the way this profit and loss budget performance report, for those of you that review the packet, works, is the first column is basically those items that we have actually...
You start out hoping it'll work, you work towards making it work, and then one day you can say it's working. We got the, it's like a chemistry formula. Got the right ingredients. It's going to work. And I thank Linda and Lynn and Chief Harmon for their tenacity in leading the rest of the board to this conclusion. And I hope that you all will be very diligent in your support in making sure that you're behind this thing. And if you're not, speak up so we can fix it before it becomes broken. Because right now, I believe we're on the right path.
Should we take comments from the public on this now? Any? Okay. Would anybody like to comment?
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Jim Watt. You probably recognize that name, and I think it's also appropriate tonight that we also recognize that Rochelle and Vanessa are here, and they are going to be the new board members. Rochelle happens to be my daughter-in-law, so I'm not here for the purpose of trying to present anything that she might feel is important here. These are my own positions on this matter. I've given it a great deal of thought. I've spent 40 years doing contract negotiation. I know how to negotiate. I know how to put together legal documents. So I think I can provide hopefully some good recommendations to the board here in connection with this contract. I'd also like to preface my remarks by saying that I've been doing a little posting here on Nextdoor Kensington, and one commenter to what it is I put on their website indicated that it looked like I was going in the direction of trying to go back maybe to the RFP process and bring somebody else in to collect our garbage, and that is absolutely not the case. Having lived here for 46 years, I can tell you that I've seen the Bayview trucks coming up and down my street a lot of times. I really like the people that work here. I think that every effort should be made to try to negotiate this contract. So with that in mind, I would like to kind of stay on an agenda here, because if I don't, I'm going to wander all over the place, and a lot of you here probably are here to speak. I don't want to deny you that privilege. However, I would like to ask for a little bit more time than might otherwise be the case, because I can tell you I put in countless hours studying this, reading the legal contract. I even at my own expense had I do consulting work, had two of my outside attorneys confirm some of my concerns about the legal contract as it's currently written. And as I indicated, I've also spent a great deal of time looking at the economics of this thing. And while I don't think that there's a great deal of difference, I do think that there are some areas for potential improvement. So I'd like to start first by handing out what it is I'm going to talk about. And the board can follow. I have 6 of these, so one can go down to Lynn and sheet over there. A lot of this stuff is, when I get a little bit further in here, I'm going to get into the legal issues here and some of the areas there where potential improvement is probably warranted. And that's going to be extremely boring for all of you. Therefore, I'm just going to go right on through it. These people at the board here now have my comments. They have the background upon which I have made those conclusions. So I'm just going to put it out there very quickly for you, so as to not bore you particularly on the legal aspects, whereas I think you'd probably be more interested in what I might have to...
Mr. Watt, can I interrupt you for a second? How long do you anticipate your presentation
Probably
to be?
about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, there's only really 4 pages here, so pretty large print here, so I can read through this thing pretty quickly. And by the way, one last thing is that any of you that went on the agenda, if you looked at the letters that came in, you saw that I put in 3 pages of detailed comments, particularly with respect to the economic issues associated with this contract. So I'd like to start out first by doing a kind of a broad overview here to look at the bigger picture and then get into more of the specifics. And first I'd like to talk about Bayview's financial position. Bayview right now is more profitable than they have been in the last 8 years based upon the information that I've received, and possibly even beyond that. And that, of course, is primarily due to the fact that this year they had a 21% rate increase. Their net income to revenues is this year is projected to be 12.4%, which is better than major waste providers like Waste Management. You go online, you'll see that their percent is 7.1. and Allied Waste, the next biggest provider, is 3.6. So they're getting a very good return on their revenues. Their ROI, which is return on investment, is the number that you come up with when you invest the income that they make against the investment that they have in their company, which is largely the trucks that they have, is a very, very healthy 35%. So there's another aspect of this deal which is of great benefit to Bayview, and that is it's an 8-year contract, and that 8-year contract will enable them to go out and purchase new trucks, which of course is very reasonable. But that buying that new equipment will reduce their rental fees, it will increase their depreciation, and this will improve their cash flow position. So all I want to stress here is that Bayview had their problems, there's no question about it, from a financial standpoint over the 2009 to 2013 year period. Right now they are in an extremely healthy position. What about Bayview's rate structure? Well, contrary to some of the information that we received, the rate structure compared to like communities, if we look at the two principal cans that we have here, which is a 32 and a 20 gallon, their rate structure, when we adjust for the franchise fees, and I won't get into why we need to do that, but Tracy here did that, and I certainly agree with that. But if we do not adjust for the backyard charge, which she did, the rate structure that is actually being offered, that Bayview currently has, is probably, by my calculations, about $3 to $4 a month above comparable communities. And I do mean comparable communities because towns like Lafayette, Orinda, they have what's called an HTS service price, which is hard to serve area. And for those hard-to-serve areas, the rate structure for those areas is considerably greater. So I want to point out that the rate difference here is probably in Bayview's favor. I'm not making a big deal out of this. I just want everybody to understand that the rate structure is somewhat in Bayview's favor here. What I am concerned about is that in this contract, it's been referred to as a state-of-the-art contract, but there is no change in food scrap recycling, no up-to-date color-specific containers, no weekly green pickups, no senior handicap discounts, no educational programs, no return of compost to the community, no backyard collection fees, no good incentives for smaller 20-gallon cans, and so on. I think that maybe some of these things I really wish that they had been put in this contract. Particularly, I believe it's time for us to move, as all communities that are in the surveys that have been done here do, and charge an extra fee for people who like to have backyard pickup. And if in fact, as I put in what it is that I have provided to you both in the packet that was in the agenda and to the board here tonight, if in fact you do put in that $5 extra charge, you could probably reduce rates for all of us, because about 20% by my calculation of the people here would probably continue to take that $5 charge for the privilege. We could probably reduce the overall rates for everybody else on their can size by about $1 a month. Why not do it? Now, we also need to keep in mind that right now we have a state mandated requirement that we achieve a 50% diversion rate. Maybe you don't know what a diversion rate is. That's the amount of product that you pick up that is diverted away from a landfill. And right now, the best number I have, and the chief would probably know this, is that I think that we're probably around a 60% number. If you go down to Albany, probably one of the leading communities in California, they're at an 80% diversion factor, meaning that 80% of the product that they pick up is recycled in some way, shape, or form. And we should have probably tried to build into this contract something that would incentivize people to do more of a diversion of these products. How do you do that? Well, one way to do it is to, as I say, is to probably bring them into the smaller can, put more information out there to encourage them to do it, maybe have special pickups, that sort of thing. Now I would like to get to the specifics of this particular contract. And I'll start with the economics. There are two areas in here from an economic standpoint which I feel are not beneficial to the community, to the ratepayers. The first is that this contract provides for a 3%, for a bracketed 3 to 5% annual increase in the rates to be paid based upon the change in the CPI. So if the CPI, excuse me, the Consumer Price Index. So if the Consumer Price Index goes up to comes in at 2%, and you have a 3%, 3 to 5% bracket, that means that the ratepayers, all of you here tonight, basically are the loser on that, because you will be paying Bayview a 3% when in fact the CPI was a 2%. If on the other hand the rates go above 5%, you are the winner, because Bayview will have to eat the difference above the 5%. So the obvious question that, as somebody who does these negotiations, that I would certainly want to know before I would agree to something like that, is what are the odds that we will go below 3 and above 5? And if you go over the last 18 years, the CPI change has been 10 times below 3 and 1 time above 5. So therefore you have a 10 to 1 chance that the ratepayers are going to come out on the short end of this thing. If in fact the CPI stays at the rate it has been at at the average rate it's been at over the last 5 years, this was 1.9%, and in fact we pay them 3%, the difference over an 8-year span compounded would be, for all of us ratepayers, would be $135,000 extra that we would have paid to Bayview. I think that's something that we should take into consideration.
Mr. Wan, it's been about 8 minutes, so I'm going to ask you to keep in mind you got about 2 more minutes.
All right. I'm basically just going to cover the economics, because I'll leave except for 2 things. Then the other thing is, I'm concerned that this becomes a precedent, this 3% becomes a precedent for the police contract. The other economic point which concerns me is the franchise fee. We currently have a franchise fee of 2%. They want to raise it to 4%. A franchise fee is the amount of money that the company pays back to Kensington, and I believe that that amount of money should remain, that franchise fee of 2% should remain. I think that's more than adequate to meet the needs of servicing the waste recycle needs of this community. All right, I have a lot of comments on legal issues, but given the length of time that I've already expended on this, since I didn't say to my script, I will just touch on 2 of those, because these are 2 extremely important ones. One is the assignment clause. There's an assignment clause in this contract, which is basically a clause which provides the contractor the right to assign or transfer his interest in this contract to another party. And I'm not going to go into the specifics, because I told you I didn't want to bore you with the legal details, but I can assure you that under this assignment clause, the way it is currently written, the contractor could in fact be entering into this contract, this 8-year contract with us, with rates which are, as I've already described earlier, somewhat above market, turn around and sell it to a larger provider, maybe Waste Management or Allied, and pocket a substantial profit because of what that company might pay him. I'm not saying they're going to do it, but when you're writing legal contracts, you have to think through those aspects. And so my concern is that this contract needs to be relooked at from that standpoint, and at the very least, there needs to be language put in there, and I put this into the information I provided them. There needs to be some sort of clause which would allow for the ratepayers here to at least share 50-50 in whatever profit might be derived should Bayview go in that direction. The last thing is the default provision of this contract. The default provision, and you will see the letter I got back from my attorney, as she pointed out, is very, very poorly written. It is very confusing. And the default provision effectively, while it covers labor dispute issues and what would happen if there was a labor dispute and garbage were to start to pile up in your backyard, that they can step in after 7 days of that labor dispute and bring in another provider to take care of the situation. That's taken care of. That's taken care of. But what isn't taken care of is a controlled default, meaning Bayview goes into a financial situation where they cannot service us. In that case, we have to go through an extremely lengthy default procedure, and that default procedure could take 30, 60, up to 90 days while garbage would continue to mount. Those are my two basic concerns with the legal, and with that I'll close my comment. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. Anybody else? Tracy, did you hear anything that you thought ought to be addressed?
I can.
You want to go first? Okay.
All right, I'm just going to take two of the points that you raised. One is the assignment provision, Mr. Watt. It says expressly, I think I can read you the actual clause. Page 41, this agreement shall not be transferred, sold, pledged, hypothecated, leased, or assigned, nor shall any rights or privileges herein be transferred, sold, pledged, hypothecated, leased, or assigned either in whole or in part, nor shall title hereto or thereto, either legal or equitable, or any right, interest, or property herein or therein pass to or vest in any person except the contractor, and then going down, without the prior written consent of the district. Right, so you're, I mean, you're, wait a minute, I'm not gonna, it's my turn. Your objection to the assignment is it seems to be an unfettered assignment provision in which Bayview can profit and the district has no say. That is not the case. It may be a condition where if Bayview wanted to assign the contract for a profit, that negotiation would take place during such period of time when they approached us for notice of the assignment. I think you're putting the rabbit in the hat and you're making certain speculative conclusions when the language here is to the contrary. So that's my response to your comments regarding assignment. With respect to default, the remedies are many, not the least of which is you would go into court because it's a public health situation. You'd go into court and you'd get an order for operating so that you didn't create a public health crisis. And that is one remedy under the contract. I'm sure your attorney would have been familiar with that remedy. I would go in to get a receiver to operate it if there was such an occasion, and that can even be done on an ex parte basis with no notice. So to say there aren't remedies for default and it would take up to 90 days, frankly, it's a legal absurdity. And no one who's a responsible member of this board would ever take that position.
Yeah, why don't you come on up and just, you know, cursorily respond to things that stand out, if any.
Okay, well,
I want to say one thing here. I just have to say this. Just about every point Mr. Watt has raised has come up for discussion at some point in the last 3 meetings. This is very Johnny-come-lately. We're, you know, at the 11th hour here. We've had 2 previous board meetings where the instruction was, get us a finished product so the board can vote on it. Mr. Watt was not present at those meetings. We're now here ready, trying to go forward with something, and it would have been great if some of these points had been raised earlier. There's not a whole lot we can do with them now unless it's something new that we haven't considered. Anyway, go ahead.
I certainly appreciate your time and effort that you put into this. Clearly, I could see that from the letter that you shared. Solid waste, while it seems like a simple business, the truck drives by and picks up the containers, there's a lot to it, and there's a lot of details. I've been in the business for 25 years, and so I bring with that my experience to this Kensington contract. I think that you have a good contract on the table. I'm going to try to respond to a few of the key points that Mr. Watt brought up, particularly the financial related ones. I'm sure many of you are involved in finance in some way. There are dozens of different types of profit metrics you can look at. There's different types of return on investment calculations. And certainly some of the numbers that Mr. Watt may have calculated may have been accurate. Some of them, I think, were inaccurate, but I don't want to get into those details. But what I want to tell you is that in our business, we use a profit that is calculated in terms of an operating ratio. It's essentially a percentage. And we've been building that into over 100 contracts since I've been in the business. I've never seen a return on investment on capital used as a calculator of the company's profit. And so there's a 12% profit return, and that is certainly within the range of normal. You mentioned the waste management and Allied, their percentages. I will say for the first time in my 25 years, I am looking at an ROI for waste management. It's a really unusual circumstance. They're in sole source negotiations, and they're looking at a 5.5% ROI. And that's calculated as net income divided by revenues less net income. It's a different calculation than presented in your paper, and I think different than these numbers that you're looking for. When I use that same formula for the Bayview analysis, I calculated a 6.6% in a comparable calculation to the waste management 5.5% that waste is looking for here in Alameda County. So I think the profit level is very reasonable. With regard to the rate benchmarks, I spoke on that, I think it was 2 meetings ago, and there was a memo that was presented, which clearly Mr. Watt reviewed and seemed to understand a lot of the details and nuances. His point was that there's a few agencies that are included there that are not representative benchmarks, specifically Moraga and Belvedere. And I really think that those are excellent benchmarks. They have hilly terrains, challenging conditions to service, narrow, windy roads, and all of those things. So I think that those benchmarks that we presented, there was 12 that we considered comparable. It's hard to get an exact match, but I think that those that we identified are reasonable, and with that you are slightly above the average when you look at the backyard service rate. Great points about the state-of-the-art contract, and certainly we did not specify new carts in kind of the blue, green, and black color scheme that many agencies are using, or the food waste collection. Those are very costly additions, and we had a clear message and a clear objective in the negotiations was to keep the rate impact to a minimum. And so we did not build those in. We do have the option of changing the scope at any time and negotiating to add on new costs, and food waste is specifically called out there. It results in doubling of your green waste collection costs, and we estimated that that doubling of those collection costs would be as much as $10 a month. And if you filled out the community survey, you'll see, well, many people were interested in food waste collection.
Expensed funding to pay for the month that we are currently in. So this is reports for October. Now October, it shows that we didn't have any expense in that item. And the reason for that is we pay our workers' comp insurance once a year. Our workers' comp bill was $28,817.91. That's in the third column. That's our year-to-date column. So that's why that shows up there. So it was probably paid in July, and it moves over 3 columns to show where, year-to-date for that once-a-year expenditure is made. Now, unfortunately, certain items like the workers' comp, the 4th column is the year-to-date budget. What Debbie, our accountant, does, well, she'll take whatever the annual budget is for that item, and she'll divide it basically by 12 and try to smooth it in there so you can kind of track it monthly if there's any variance. However, there can't be a variance when there's only a one-time payment of that bill, which occurred in July. So even though the year-to-date budget item shows $20,000 and the annual budget is $50,000 for that item, we've actually just made that payment. So I think that's the variance he's speaking of.
Can I ask a quick question? If it's a one-time payment of $28,000, then the annual budget shows $50,000.
I've just been informed there's another payment coming. Okay.
What's the other payment going to be?
Second.
So how much is left to be billed? Okay.
What's the next one?
564?
564.
Okay.
Communications.
Our communication bill basically comes from Richmond PD. This month it's showing a 0. Reason for that is they probably haven't sent us the bill yet. They're late all the time. In fact, I think they run about 3 months late. So we didn't receive a bill from them, so we didn't make a payment. So in next month's report, it'll probably be a double payment if their billing catches up. So there'll be something there. That's why there's I guess a variance that you're referring to of nothing this month when the budgeted amount is about $13,000. So if we had received our bill, it would have been right on the mark. What's the next one?
594.
594. 594 is our community policing account. You should be answering these, not me. We expensed $1,500 this month, and do you recall what those? Oh.
The website upgrade wasn't budgeted, and so that's why the variance exists here, and the payment that was made this month was an additional invoice received from PagePoint for work they've done on the website.
Just so everyone knows, the board actually authorized us to move forward with the new and improved website after the budget when it was approved last year. So there's going to be a variance every month as we pay that bill. What was the next one?
830.
Ooh,
Legal.
830. In my general manager's report that Mr. Kruger didn't read, I mentioned the fact that we just didn't receive our billing for October. They recently sent the bill 1st of November, and you made that payment in our last payment run. So that's going to be reflected in next month's report. And that was commented on in my general manager report, which is in the packet.
Final item's 840.
I'm sorry?
840.
840.
Accounting.
Well, the accounting function is basically our CPA accountant, and I'm assuming she was late in getting her bill in. So that's also going to be reflected in next month's payment. So anytime you see a 0 in that first column, it usually all that means is there was either no payment made because there wasn't one due, or the billing was late. And it's kind of as simple as that. But you know, we anticipate those bills coming in. I hope that answers your questions on.
Carl, is that?
Not 594. If you have an annual budget of $2,000 and you've already spent almost $7,000, I didn't understand what this was.
I'm sorry, Carl. Is that better? Can you hear me?
My hearing is good.
Okay, I apologize. I apologize for not speaking loudly enough. The board, after the budget was approved, the board passed a motion asking that there be an upgrade made to the website, so this will be over budget for the entire year.
So you're telling me it was an unbudgeted item?
Correct.
Okay. And just to review, total cost of that item for the whole year is going to be what, roughly?
I believe the contract was for $7,000.
Yeah, that sounds right.
$7,500.
Yeah.
Plus we have the original $2,000 in there. So by the end of the year, if we're in
about
budget,
$10,000.
It'd be about $9,500.
Right. Anything else, Carl? Okay, thank you. All right, then I think we're ready for a motion on adoption of the consent calendar.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the consent calendar.
I'll second it. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, we now come to the first item of new business, which is consideration for possible action of the proposed contract between the district and Bayview Refuse and Recycling for services, for a new contract essentially to take effect after the current contract expires in August 2015. And I'd like to give just a little bit of background here. We have been at this topic now for, I think, 4 meetings. The Property Owners Association meeting, was that in July or June? I can't remember what month that was. It was a Saturday. Anyway, at that meeting, it was quite a packed room, even more packed than this room. And the subject, the purpose of the meeting was for people to talk about issues that they cared about, and one of those issues was the garbage collection contract with Bayview. And many people at that meeting expressed, in fact, overwhelmingly people at that meeting expressed support for the idea of continuing to have a relationship with Bayview for garbage collection. And at that meeting, I suggested that maybe we should start thinking out loud about, we had already decided we were going down the path of a request for proposal to look for new contractors, but think out loud about the possibility of, instead of going down that path, negotiate directly with Bayview and see if there was any prospect there for entering into a new contract with them. We had some spirited discussions about that at board meetings that followed. We did not agree in those first board meetings about what we should do, but the board decided to essentially let Linda and me explore the prospect of negotiating a new contract with Bayview, and that's what Linda and I did for several months. And I have to tell you, the last week of negotiations, I think we burned up anywhere from 16 to 20 hours just trying to hammer out all the details with Bayview and come to an agreement that we felt was a good one from the perspective of both sides. There has been controversy about this for a long time. There are people who want to keep Bayview services. There are people who do not like Bayview and want to develop a relationship with a new contractor. And the idea of the request for proposal was that if we really want to leverage market forces to our best benefit, the rationale goes, then you put it out for public bid and you let the companies compete with each other, and hopefully that process leads to the best possible bid one could get. However, that's a wild card, and I think a number of us in this community have felt for some time that it's particularly a wild card for this community because our service needs are so unique. We're a tiny community, about, 2,300 homes, almost zero commercial base. We have some wonderful businesses here, no doubt about it, and I love them, but if you stack them all up together, it constitutes a tiny commercial base compared to most cities, which makes the community unattractive to a solid waste collection company because they make a lot of their profit off of commercial customers. It's a lot of hilly, windy roads that do not accommodate the typical mechanized garbage truck collection that many communities around here have. Our citizens, a good portion of them, demand backyard service and need backyard service, again making the more modern kind of approach not workable here in Kensington. And just to be clear about what I mean about the modern approach, you look over in the city of Berkeley, you look over in El Cerrito, you see they have cans that the garbage collection company provides, and they're structured so that a specially designed truck can drive by, and there's a mechanical arm that swings by and grabs the can and dumps it into the truck, puts it back, and the truck moves on. The workers do hardly anything but drive the truck. And that's a wonderful business model for a company because eliminating the need for workers to go out and carry cans means workers' comp costs are going to go down. It means the possibility of an injury is much lower. The newer technology is more attractive because it's more mechanized, fewer things can go wrong. So Kensington demands the old model of garbage collection. The strong guys who carry the cans on their backs will travel some distance sometimes to get the cans from a backyard, working on a hilly surface, working on narrow streets. The trucks are necessarily smaller and not the modern technological type. They're not, the only mechanization of the truck is the machinery that grinds up and compacts the garbage. So taking all those things into account and asking HF&H to analyze the rate we're currently getting and see if, given the kind of service profile Kensington has, are we getting a rate that is roughly market competitive with other jurisdictions that get similar service? that is, other jurisdictions with similar characteristics. And Tracy Swanborn here from is here from HF&H. She already opined at previous meetings that she thought we were in the ballpark with the rates we're currently getting. And of course, there has been a rate review that was done in the past year. So the thought was, well, if we can get in the ballpark of keeping the kind of rate we have now, and we can actually enter into a modern type contract with Bayview, because the contract we currently have is antiquated, ancient, out of date, and poorly written to bat. So if we could rewrite the contract so that it's more clear from both sides' point of view, less amenable to dispute, and just, you know, a modern contract, and we get to keep the wonderful service we've been getting from Bayview, and I think the citizens of this community overwhelmingly support the idea of continuing our relationship with Bayview because of the good service we get. And we did a satisfaction survey which bore that out, I might add, overwhelmingly. So we might not be getting the best conceivable possible market rate we could get if we got really lucky with an RFP by entering into this proposed contract with Bayview. But we're getting a good rate. We have a known provider who is known to provide good and dependable service, a provider who is liked very much in the community. So we get a certain amount of certainty, which is worth something. It's worth a lot. And so that's been my thinking all along, is if we, you know, we can get a certain deal with a known provider, good service, and we're in the ballpark for a competitive market rate, then we should go for that instead of taking the risk of going through a very expensive RFP process, and maybe in the end we wind up with nothing like the City of Oakland did with their last RFP. So that's kind of the reasoning behind why we went down the path we went down. Last couple of board meetings, there was pressure for us to get this done, and it was justifiable pressure, because if this negotiation with Bayview wasn't going to work, we were going to have to move forward with the RFP, and we wanted to leave ourselves enough time. The last, you know, board meeting, to make a long story short, it's already getting kind of long, but the last board meeting, basically the decision was either we have a contract for consideration and possible adoption at this board meeting, or we move on to the RFP. I said at that last meeting that I thought we would have an agreement well before the meeting we're having here tonight, and that I would get that contract out there as soon as we had come to an agreement and finalize it with Bayview. In fact, Bayview had, as of the time of the last meeting, they had already signed off on the contract. We still had to get a final round of legal review from our attorneys, and that's where the situation was at the last meeting. So we did come to a final agreement about 2.5 weeks ago, and again, I want to extend my thanks to Louis Fagoni, Greg Christie, and of course Haig Harris, who's here tonight, for the hard work they did in negotiating with us, and of course Tracy Swanborn was also quite indispensable to making this negotiation work. I consider the contract we're looking at tonight to be a good deal. I think it's one that most of the citizens of Kensington want to see us enter into. But we're here to talk about it, and I guess I've told my part of the story. I don't know if anybody wants to weigh in. I know Linda was a huge part of negotiating. It was a team. Linda, Chief Harmon, and me. Tracy was sort of the neutral third party, and of course the folks from Bayview. But I do, again, I guess the last wonderful example of Linda's brilliance and her productivity was the way she helped us come to a proposed contract. Anybody from the board want to add anything or subtract anything?
I have a couple of things. One, I actually think it's important to say why Lynn and Linda were selected to do the negotiations. And that, at least in my opinion, was Lynn had the idea that we should maybe try to do this, and he was obviously very much in favor of his ideas. I'm always in favor of my ideas, too. I love my ideas. Linda was the skeptic, and so we thought that would be a good way to approach this, to have the yin and the yang, someone who didn't think it could be done this way, didn't necessarily have a lot of trust, in the process or in reaching a fair agreement, and Lynn, who felt like this is the way to go. And I have to compliment them because I think they bargained very hard on behalf of the community. Unfortunately, people don't get to see that. But there was a lot of back and forth and a lot of saying no and a lot of saying okay and a lot of saying finally yes on both sides. And that's the way contracts go. The other thing is the community made it pretty clear that they wanted to keep Bayview and that they didn't want to do an RFP. And when we made that decision, and those of you who come to previous meetings, you've heard me say that, there's a trade-off for doing that because we don't get the advantage of seeing what all the other possible rates might have been from other haulers, and we give up something by doing that. So we give up a little, potentially, in our ability to negotiate. And the consensus that we reached based on what we were hearing from the community, particularly the people that came to the meetings, was that's what people wanted. They didn't want to spend the money on an RFP. They didn't want to take the chance that somehow Bayview would not be selected. And so they're willing to give up a little on the, did we get the very best deal possible? The idea that there wasn't a lot of community vetting of this is just sort of ridiculous. We spent 4 meetings talking about this contract, talking about what we were doing, talking about the potential terms, and the contract has been out in the public now for, I think, 2 weeks for everyone to see. So hopefully we're looking forward to hearing your comments tonight. But I do think that the process was one that was iterative, that we all didn't agree on from the beginning, that we sort of came around to in the way that we have done as a board to build consensus and collaboration within the members of the board and to come out with what we think is a fair contract for the community given the way we decided to approach it.
When this idea was put on the table, my sense was that this was not a good idea. And not a good idea because in my background, it broke just about every rule in business negotiations one could break. Yes. Let me speak up. I'll try. And so what we had was an adversarial potential relationship with the vendor. We had a contract that was expiring. We had the need to go through a very detailed process and evaluation with a limited amount of resource as a district, and to come up with a solution that was mutually agreeable both to the people, the voters, and to the business partners. And we went about it in a totally unprecedented wrong direction. Normally you would go to an RFP, you would go through some process of vetting to make this happen. But we also had some really important ingredients here. We had the will of the district and the voters and Bayview to put this thing together and to make it work. In a relationship, in a business relationship, we also had we also had a budgetary restraint that said if you can find a way to make this happen, we should try to do that. And so with those elements in the pot, this group went to work, and amazingly, out of that came an agreement, or at least the initial vestiges of an agreement that said. And I'm from a public utilities background, so I mean I can tell you some classic steps that we took that would frighten most people. That we came up with a good working agreement. We came up with a good contract. We came out with a way to make things happen. We came up with the opportunity to meet the deadlines, and we came out with, most importantly, with a way to save some money, although the goal here was not to do this on the cheap, because when you're looking at a multi-year contract worth thousands of dollars, it's not on the cheap. But you can spend your money wisely to make sure we get the value that we were looking for, and I think that the team that was responsible for this, and I say the team on both sides because I believe that Bayview was very much involved and committed to making this happen, as was the leadership on coming out of Chief Harmon's office. That's what we've got. So tonight, what we have is the opportunity to discuss: can we go forward now with all the hard work and with all the recommendations to allow this to be an operating plan to replace the current Bayview plan? We need you, the citizens, to think about what you say you want. We need your honest opinion and comments as to how likely we can be successful in this, because it's not the board is in this. Everybody in this whole thing, and we're going to live with our decisions here for another 8, 9, 10 years. But I think this is the right forum and the right team of people to comment here. There's going to be a couple of areas where we may disagree or we have questions. Let's iron them out. Let's figure out how to make it work, because at this point, I think we have a very good solution to our refuse collection and management process, and it requires now just a few more some more input. I want to thank Bayview and Haig Harris. I know he worked very hard. The first thing he did when he walked in today, and I saw he walked up with a smile on his face, I said, "Oh, they made it work." and that's a good feeling. Okay, those of you that have been involved in contract negotiations, especially in the public utilities way.
When we asked them if they wanted to pay $10 a month, there was, I think, 6 or 7% that said they would be willing to, and no one else wanted to pay. But it is something, if the community got more interested over time, you could certainly change the scope of services and add that on. With regard to the 50% diversion rate that's required by AB 939, Kensington, I'm sorry I don't know their rate offhand, but what I can tell you is that Kensington reports as part of the county. In fact, the county handles all of that reporting. And so your participation and your contribution is actually probably very high because Kensington doesn't have many businesses, and so residents are really doing a good job here in town. I'd like to say that there is a significant financial incentive to divert, and it's, if you look at the rate structure, the 64-gallon can and the 96-gallon cans are 2 and 3 times as high as a 32-gallon rate. And that really incentivizes your customers into the 20 and 32-gallon container sizes. In fact, 90% of your customers are in those small containers. With regard to the 3% and the 5% annual increase, one of the real compelling initiatives that we had in the sole source negotiations, and by the way, we would have had this if we went out to a competitive process, was to simplify the rate adjustment process. There's been detailed reviews that have been done over the last few years. It's very costly and sometimes contentious. So we were driving for a simplified compensation mechanism. I think we have a very good one. The 3%, while Mr. Watt did point out that it's 1% above the recent average, which is a 2% CPI. The company operates with Teamsters Local 315 drivers, and the wage rates are actually defined over the term of the next 8 years. It's a 3% increase on the labor costs, 3% on the pension costs, and 8% on the health and benefits. When I look back at this historically, the labor costs are 40% of the total cost. And when you factor in those higher than CPI increases, believe it or not, it turned out to be a 3% increase if you had looked historically over the last 5 years, factoring that in. So I think the 3% sort of ceiling reflects that the company is in fact going to incur much higher increases on a significant component of their cost. We covered the legal piece. So the last piece was the franchise fee. You're going to add an additional 2%, which is about $20,000 to $24,000 a year. It's really something the company is giving you. It's not something that they're adding into the cost. So you're getting a typical CPI adjustment. you're not getting the extra 2% for the franchise fee plus the CPI. They're actually giving you this in exchange for the contract for 8 years. I know money can be set aside and accumulated for the RFP process that you would go through in 8 years, and that's what the money would be attributed for. It can also be used for things like public education. You expressed interest in having more of that. The district could use the money for that purpose and hire a consultant or do some work on their own. Did I cover enough?
Just one thing. There was, I think, in the last 2 meetings, there were a lot of folks who wanted to see a much higher franchise fee. And my understanding is that this 7% fee is still pretty much at the lower end of what's typical. Is that true?
Yes, the average franchise fee is 10%, and we have some agencies that are significantly higher than that.
Thank you. Come on up.
Even though it says PayPal, it can't be bought. I agree with Lynn in this case. It is sort of 11th hour. I think a lot of people put a lot of work into this. There's an interesting, almost unheard of agreement. We've got Bayview agreeing. We've got our consultant agreeing. We've got board members agreeing. So it is a little hard to understand why we want to slow the process or stop the process. I think that there were some things in Jim's presentation that are not quite on the mark. I agree with our consultant. I've lived in Moraga. I know Orinda well. I've partied in Belvedere. You know, and I have friends that go to holiday gatherings in Piedmont. They're a lot like us. Tracy is not like us. Big streets, big wide streets, planned developments, etc. We have a very unique and special place. We have narrow roads, Cambridge, Eagle Hill. In fact, Eagle Hill is a dead end. They actually back the truck up Eagle Hill to collect the garbage. Berkeley Park, it's steep. How do you put a can in a gutter that's at, whatever, 20 degrees? It falls over. Okay, there's Willamette and Oberlin. We've got, my point is that we have some physical hurdles. Now, we can all look at where we live, and if we live on a flat road, we go, hey, no big deal. And I can just stick it out in the curb. I think as a community, though, I don't really mind sort of bearing a cost for, just kind of averaging the cost over the entire community. So I think this is a decent proposal. I'm sort of oddly with everybody here, the board, our consultant, and Bayview on this. We all would like to see different things, weekly green pickup. Well, we get bi-monthly green pickup unlimited. If you get weekly, you get 1 can. We get, I think I put out 12 bags the other night. They take them all. Senior discount, well, I'm not a senior yet, but yeah. Composting, nice idea. Food scraps, nice idea. Backyard collection fee. Backyard is even your front yard. Backyard means anything that's not at the curb. A separating fee, like I said, I'm for just 1 fee per person per whatever can you have. I think this is a great deal, and I support the work that's been put into it so far and hope that you guys will go forward so we can move on to other issues. Thank you.
Anybody else? Come on up, please.
Thank you.
My name is Rick. Boy, normally I come booming out of a microphone.
Just like that.
My name is Rick Ardis. I wanted to say 2 things. First of all, thank you, Jim, where did Jim go? Thank you, Jim, for writing that letter. That was actually very helpful. That's the kind of discourse, perhaps tamped down a tiny bit, that we should be having. It actually made me look at the math of the contract and made me read it a little more carefully because I wanted to see what the issue was. Thank you, Tracy, for just explaining that very coherently. I thought it was a completely sensible contract. I thought the way that we resolved conflict in it was, since we've had a history of it, a good thing. And I appreciated that. Just for those of you who care about the CPI, I'm a chemist by background, science guy, so when math comes up, I kind of just go there reflexively. If you look at those CPI numbers, which can seem kind of terrifying if you read it, if you use 1.9%, which is driven by an outlier number completely, that's well outside 95% confidence intervals for those of you who care, it works out to be about 65 cents a month. If you use a normal CPI, it works out to be about $1 a year. So we're not talking large, it's large dollars in aggregate at the end. It's a small thing, I think, for us as a community, and not one I would want to blow up a contract over. When I saw, I took a spreadsheet, 12 cents per household per month, I said, okay, I'm not losing sleep over this one. So I just wanted to say that was a job pretty well done, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Come on up, Simon.
My name is Simon Brofman, and Lucy couldn't make it tonight. I'm sorry, I apologize.
A little closer to the mic, please. No, a little closer to the mic.
Oh, Lucy.
And Lucy's a great dog.
Yes, she is. She couldn't make it tonight, so I apologize. My real concern is what's going to happen with this 4% franchise fee. I know that the composition of the board is going to change, so this is probably a question that may be more appropriate to the new board composition. But I think it's something that we need to start thinking about and planning for, because I think there's a lot of beneficial, creative ways to use that money. And so I would like this board to begin thinking about it, and the new board to finalize on the best ways to manage those fees. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. Anybody else? Haig, did you have anything at all to say, or are you happy? Oh, you're not happy. Gonna hold you to that. Thank you. Anybody else from the public? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Dan O'Brien, resident of Kensington. And I would just like to say that having listened to all of this, I think aside from whether the contract is good or not, my observation is that this is a subject that is near and dear to the people of Kensington, probably because it hits the pocketbook. And I think the pros and the cons and the alternatives were widely discussed and presented. And I think the process that we went through to get to whatever conclusion it comes to is really excellent. And I think it speaks very well for the board and the community's participation in this. So I think the contract sounds fine to me. But my point, I guess I would like to make is, I think the process that went through to develop this, to get this to this point was excellent. And I think that's a far cry from what it's been in the past. And I hope it continues in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. I hope so too. Yes, sir. Come on up.
Not being a financial analyst, I don't know if this is a great deal, a good deal, or a fair deal, but I sure as hell am glad there's finally a deal.
Okay. All right. Yes, sir.
We have to do a 218 here.
Yes, I think we do. Why don't we explain that? Could you do us a favor?
Well, briefly, a 218 hearing is something we have to go through with the community whenever there's a rate increase that amounts to an effective tax increase. So as we've done with every rate increase over the last contract, every time there was a 4-year rate review, we'd have to take it out to the public and give them another chance to comment on it under this Prop 218 provision, which requires notice to the community and a chance to come in and actually express any other concerns you have. And if the number of comments against it reaches a threshold, then we can't pass the rate increase. I just wanted to make sure when I read this, I didn't see anything about a Prop 218 provision being part of the contract, the notion that we have to do a Prop 218 hearing. And if we do sign this tonight, we need some recognition that we still have this potential for a 218 hearing down the road. And it's not built into the language as I see it.
Haig, it was your understanding we have to do a 218 hearing, wasn't it?
It's a matter of law, not a matter of...
Well, no, that's not the point. You don't object to it, correct? Okay, that's it.
Okay.
It isn't something that's written in the contract, so it's law.
Yeah.
So it will take place.
Okay.
And the threshold is 50% plus one of the customers affected say no, then there's another.
Go ahead, Greg.
I kind of wish I knew you were going to say that before you said it. Yeah, I was at a phone conference with our attorney today, and there's still some question of whether or not we need a 218 hearing in regards to the contract itself. We're going to do some research, and the 218 hearing may come up after the first year of the contract when we go before giving our first rate increase based on the CPI. And that 218 hearing will carry over through the course of the contract. However, I don't believe, and our legal counsel does not believe at this time, that we need a 218 hearing to hear the actual contract itself. That could come up at a later date after we go into contract.
Okay, here's what we'll do. We'll nail that down. If there's any doubt, we're going to err on the side of caution, but we can nail that down and we can report on that issue at the next board meeting, okay? All right, any further discussion by board members on this?
I have one comment.
Sure.
And that is, I actually would like to thank Jim for his thoughtful comments, both in the letter that you wrote to the board and in your presentation tonight. I really appreciated the way you presented your remarks, and I thank you for them.
Actually, let me second that. I was a little hard on you before. I do want to thank you for the work you did, and I do hope that you'll continue to participate. All the points you raised were, you know, right on in terms of being issues that need to be discussed. It's just a little disappointing that they came so late, that's all.
hold my fire.
Do I have a motion?
I move that we adopt the contract that was part of the package tonight.
I'll second it. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'm going to ask for clarity. By adopting the contract, what are we enabling?
Well, if we adopt the contract, we'll sign it, and Bayview will sign it, and we'll be in contract. And we may or may not have a Prop 218 hearing.
If we adopt the contract, we will sign the contract. What are we enabling? What process are we enabling if we agree with the contract?
Entering into the proposed contract, making it legally binding on both sides. Okay? In other words, we're going forward. We vote tonight. We're going to sign the contract. We've got a new contract starting, well, January 1st. Well, yeah, actually, technically, September 1st, 2015. Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And thank you all. Okay, our next item is presentation and discussion of a proposed contract between the district and the Kensington Police Officers Association for possible board action. Actually, I think we made it clear that we're going to present the contract tonight and be planning on taking a vote next board meeting. Chuck and Pat, will you please brief the board?
Yes, so I'm going to start off and just give some general background into how the process works and how it worked in this particular case. Chuck and I were chosen to negotiate the contract by the board because I'm a labor lawyer by training and do this in part for a living, although I haven't done collective bargaining for a long time, because I mostly do litigation. Chuck is a business lawyer, understands, as you will see, the financial implications and the terms that are very complicated when it comes to public employee contracts and what you can and can't do with respect to particular provisions of those contracts. So we're obligated to engage in what's called the collective bargaining process, which means that we meet with the police officers, representatives of police officers, to discuss the terms and conditions of employment going forward. We start with the contract that existed previously, and basically everything's on the table. We can negotiate up or down, but we have to negotiate in good faith, as do they. And so the way the process works and generally works in collective bargaining is that we put items that we want to discuss on the table, they put items they want to discuss on the table, we go back and forth. Chuck and I were required, and we followed that requirement, to come to the board and get the positions that the board wanted to take before we could present them to the police officers. We would then present them to the police officers, we would talk about them, they would give us some feedback, they would go back to their members, talk about it with their members, come back to Chuck and me, tell me what their members said, then we would go back to the board and say this is their response. We would then get further direction from the board, and the process would go back and forth like that. We started this process back in May of 2014 because the contract was going to expire. The one-year contract that we entered into last year was going to expire on June 30th. Our goal was to complete a contract by June 30th. That unfortunately didn't happen, in part because we had a lot of very significant and important things that we thought we wanted to and needed to discuss with the officers, both to address the concerns of the board going forward with the financial burdens that we have with respect to some of the provisions that have been in place for years, and with respect to some of the contract itself, which was needed some redrafting because it wasn't exactly wonderfully drafted. Our goals were pretty clear. We got pretty clear direction from the rest of the board as to what our goals in the negotiation should be. One was to make sure that we keep our police department local. As you know, that's been an issue in our community and one that's been supported repeatedly and election after election by our community, that we want to have a local police department, and that we pay our police officers at a fair and competitive rate, which we have decided in years past should be somewhere around the median of what similar communities pay their police officers. We wanted to be able to provide contract terms, both in terms of the benefits and wages that we pay to our officers, as well as a lot of the other things that go along with them. These contracts have a lot of detail in them about shift differentials and uniforms and safety equipment and grievance procedures, that we had a competitive and a straightforward process in the contract that would allow us to attract high caliber officers and keep the officers that we have in our force right now. We also obviously looked at current budget restrictions, and then a high priority from the board to us was we needed to think about the future burdens that would be placed on the community. We paid particular attention to whether we should address issues like health benefits, vesting of retiree health benefits, how we should have people contribute to their pensions, if that was going to be possible, and Chuck will go into this in much more detail, what would be appropriate salary increases, and then we wanted to get rid of some of the ambiguous and confusing language in the agreement itself. There are incredible legal restrictions on what you can and can't do with respect to benefits that are paid to officers and with respect to salary and wages. So Chuck is going to explain those in detail because he really understands them. But suffice it to say, we had a lot of back and forth, a lot of, Keith is standing in the background, a lot of heated discussions with Keith Barrow, who was one of the representatives of the police officers, as was Eric Stegman. So we had some very contentious meetings, some meetings where people walked out. We had some meetings where people were extremely unhappy. We in the board had to make some very difficult decisions, and we think that the contract that we have proposed is one that will serve the community well and that will meet the goals that I outlined before. So without further ado, balls in your court.
Can everybody hear me okay? I worry about this microphone not really functioning. Before we started the meeting tonight, we passed out on the back this handout that Pat and I are looking at. Does everybody have a copy of this, or as far as we could? Okay, that's my...
You have to get closer to it.
Okay, I'm right on it. How's that?
There you go.
There you go. Well, I'm going to take you through what we did and what we think this contract accomplishes for us. How did we arrive at the financial terms we have? Well, we wanted to pay our officers fairly and within our budget constraints. Last year, the officers received a one-year contract with a 3% increase only, nothing else. Prior to that, the officers had not had a pay increase since their contract ending in June 2010. The proposed pay increase is coupled with a phased reduction in the portion of the member contributions paid by the district to CalPERS for classic employees, those officers who became members of CalPERS before January 1, 2013, and who have what we call the 3 at 50 retirement benefits package. That's basically every year of service after up to the age of 50, you get 3% of your base income as towards a retirement. So let's take a look at what we're doing here with the pay we're giving out and what we're asking the officers to pay back as shifting the employer-paid member contributions over to the officers. In year one, the officers get a 3.75% pay increase, but they will pay 3% of pay as member contributions to CalPERS for a net increase in pay of 0.75%. In year two, the officers will receive a second 3.75% pay increase, but again, they pay an additional 3% of pay as a member contribution to CalPERS for a net pay increase of 0.75%. In year three, the officers will receive a 4.25% pay increase, but they will pay an additional 3% of pay as a member contribution to CalPERS, Again, a net pay increase of 1.25%. In year 4, the officers will receive a 4.25% pay increase, but they will be required to contribute 50%. This is a very technical term, so I'm going to read it very carefully. In year 4, the officers will receive a 4.25% pay increase, but they will be required to contribute 50% of the normal cost rate, and that cost rate is the present value of projected benefits for the current year of service expressed as a percentage of payroll, up to a 12% reportable compensation cap. The current normal cost is around 27%, so the year 4 contribution will probably be 12% of CalPERS reportable compensation, requiring them to pay an additional 3% of pay as a member contribution to CalPERS, and they would receive an estimated net pay increase again of 1.25%. The pay increase and the CalPERS givebacks are not retroactive. They won't start until January 1st, if at all, and we have to file some resolutions with CalPERS to enable us to do the shifting of the EPMC, that employer-paid member contribution, to the officers and some other tax filings. But they will start together hand in glove. So that's the point of that little contribution issue. Over the 4 years of the MOU, the officers will receive a gross pay increase of 16%, but will be required to contribute an estimated 12% of pay as member contributions to CalPERS. The net cost to the district over the entire 4 years is projected at about $233,000, and attached to this handout is an actual calculation that shows how that number is contributed. By way of comparison, during that same 4-year time period, the officers will be paying about $282,000 towards their pension costs. So I think that's a pretty good economic deal, both for the officers and for the community.
Can I interrupt for 1 minute?
Sure.
So the important point here, for those of you who aren't familiar with the way this works, is in the past, we have paid the entire pension contribution for the officers. What we're doing now is working toward a system where they will pay, ultimately in the 4th year, estimated 12% of their pension contribution, which will be required by law at that time. That was our goal. We wanted to begin to have the officers contributing to their pension so that we could relieve the district of some of that burden.
And at the end of the 4 years, the officers will be paying all of their employer paid member contribution, and it'll be at the 12% ratio, basically. So that's a pretty good deal. I think that's the direction we all wanted to head in, and that's where we're going. Now, I've been talking about the classic members. Again, those are the people who were basically hired before January 1 of 2013. There is a second calculation for new members, and that's a term of art under the PEPRA, and a new member is generally any officer who first becomes a member of PERS, the Public Employee Retirement System, on or after January 1, 2013. They get the same pay increase, but will have their CalPERS pension benefits determined in accordance with California's new Public Employee Pension Reform Act of 2013, with a new benefit tier of 2.7% at 57 years of age. That means that they don't get a retirement benefit unless they retire at 57, and then they get 2.7% towards their contribution for each year of service. That's different than the current 3 at 50%. 3 at 50 rather. They've increased the age of retirement, and they've reduced the amount of contribution you're going to get. So it's a reduced benefit. This new benefit is actually based on a different pension base as well. It's 3 years of the highest average pay with limits on and a new definition of what's considered pensionable compensation, and the member contributions equal 50% of the normal cost of pension benefits with no cap. So it's not 50% subject to a 12% cap, it's 50% of whatever that normal cost is for the year. That's all on the officer's back.
So again, Chuck, if I can just interrupt for a second. This was an important negotiating point for us because we wanted to make sure that going forward, we weren't carrying the same burden that we have with our officers in the past. And so as you can see, we've really changed the dynamic, and it was a sticking point for the officers because, as those of you who've been in unions know, there's often a feeling that people don't want to be the ones who, quote, sold out the future members. But we negotiated hard on that. They finally decided that they would be willing to make this kind of a concession, and that we were grateful to them for doing that. So this is another fairly significant point that was important to us for the future of the district.
All true, thank you. Let's go on to the next point here, which is why aren't we proposing the officers contribute towards their health payments? Well, there's a number of reasons why. There's a great uncertainty about the impact of the Affordable Care Act on health care premiums, and no one still knows what impact that law is going to have, whether the premiums will go up or down. We've also determined that it's not advisable to try to change the existing benefit plans and method of payment for current employees and retirees because such a change would give rise to a potential challenge against the district that the change impairs legally vested rights the current employees and retirees may have in those benefits. It's a slippery slope to take those rights away and then face a potential lawsuit from the affected parties because we may have interfered with their vested rights. So the decision was not to change it.
And so one more thing to add to that. One of the things that we talked about with our legal counsel was, should we do this? And they were very much against this. And I am not someone who believes in conservative legal advice necessarily, but I was with them on this one because they said let another district try this out first. Kensington's a small district. We don't need to be the ones to take on this type of litigation. So we didn't want to be put in a position where we were the first out of the box trying to make this kind of a change that could lead to litigation from our retirees.
And there's also a second piece to the puzzle here, too. How many of you have ever heard of PEMCA? See, I hadn't heard of it either until I started this job. PEMCA is the Public Employees Medical and Hospital Care Act, and it provides a statewide network for providing health care benefits to public employees. If you opt into PEMCA, you only have 2 ways to provide for payment of those benefits for health care. If you want to opt out of PEMCA, you have to do it on your own and basically establish your own health care plans without any state support. That's risky. So the changes contemplated to the current benefit plan would have likely required that the district withdraw from the Public Employees Medical and Hospital Care Act benefits and establish its own plan, something like a cafeteria plan. That adds complexity, it's potentially additional cost to the mix, and we just don't know what legal uncertainties that would unleash. Again, you run up against this notion that the officers and employees may have vested rights, and any change to those current benefits could affect that vested right, and that could result in litigation. It's like stepping on a landmine. So let's take a look at the status of the retiree medical benefits. Again, current law under PEMCA limits our options. There's only 2 ways you can provide those benefit plans for current and retirees. There's very limited scope. Current retirees have a legally vested right, or they may have a legally vested right to the medical benefits they have now, and we realistically cannot change them without risk of a vested rights challenge. Current officers also have a potential legally vested right to the retiree health benefits without any vesting schedule for district contributions under a resolution the district implemented in 1987. So our forebears thought at the time that was a good deal. Well, they kind of saddled us with a long-term obligation that's now coming back to bite us. Under this contract, the employees hired after the date of this contract will be required to work 5 years for the district before qualifying for any district contribution for retiree health benefits, and they must retire from the district. They must also have completed 10 years of CalPERS service to become 50% vested in the district contribution for retiree health benefits, with that percentage increasing ratably until after 20 years they get 100% contribution. So the new hires have a different vesting schedule for retiree health plan, and it's a much more rigorous long-term vesting schedule that requires 5 years of service to the district. You have to retire, and you only get it if you stay the full time of 20 years. So that's a major change for new hires. Are there any other significant changes to the contract? Yeah, there are. But the two big ones were the retiree benefits and the contribution givebacks by the current and new hires. But we did spend time cleaning up the ambiguous language regarding vacations, sick time, disciplinary process, and equipment provisions, including provision of mandatory safety vests for all officers. If we're going to buy them safety vests, and they have to wear them on duty. Again, the question here is to clean up some old language and make sure that everybody understands what their rights and obligations are. So that's the 30,000-foot view of the contract. The actual contract is in your package tonight. You can read through it and get a better understanding of some of these more granular terms if you want to. So board questions and then public questions. And again, this is just a first reading. We won't take action on this until the next meeting. Hello?
Questions, comments from the board? None? How about you folks? Come on up.
Come on up and line up.
It's not really a question, but when I was looking over Part B on page 124, Pension Retirement Plan Classic Member Definition.
Yeah.
And down you have to include 1 year final compensation. I guess this is part of what they use to calculate the salary that they base it all on. But what are the other two? 1959 survivor benefit and include 59 survivor benefit?
Those are terms of art that talk about the survivor benefit for the spouse of the part of the employee. I can't give you the exact definition.
Oh, okay. So it's part.
It's part and parcel of the package. Pepper made a clear distinction between previous employees prior to January 1 of 2013 and new employees.
Yeah, got that.
And the previous employees, this was the benefit that was given to them. And it's clear that the employee got the benefit. It's also clear the employee survivor got the benefit too.
And those dates are just the dates they enacted, whatever that provision.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm sorry I don't know more about this particular, but that's...
Okay, yeah. Well, I didn't understand what the cryptic description was. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mabry.
Yes, Gloria Morrison, district resident. I am very happy to hear that there will be more than one hearing on this contract. In reading it, I am also pleased to see that I think you are adopting what is called a two-tier system in the vernacular. And in addition, I wonder if you could clarify for me, when it comes to retirement levels, are unused vacation, unused sick leave, all the things one hears in the news, a uniform allowance that not used, are any of those used in terms of the retirement
There's the whole definition of what constitutes pensionable compensation that you base it on. I'd have to get the act out to show it to you, but all those add-ons have really kind of been taken away.
They have been taken away.
Yeah, a lot of them just don't apply anymore. The notion was, the legislature in its infinite wisdom thought it was just too generous to add into the compensation pot a uniform allowance, for example. There may be other things. I just don't have the whole text of the law in front of me. There's a very nice pamphlet I usually carry around. I didn't bring it tonight, but we can certainly put that online for you to look at.
Yeah, and probably that could be part of the packet.
Yeah,
for
but
the
there is a new definition of what's considered pensionable that you can base the retirement benefit on for salaries.
Thank you.
It's actually covered in Article 5B.
Of sick leave. Okay, I was in calculating the retirement level. Okay, thank you.
As I said, I'm not a financial analyst, but there's some questions that occur to me about this. What were the comparables with respect to yearly raises for comparable police departments?
We actually didn't. Can I answer that? Do you mind if I answer that?
Please.
Okay. We actually didn't look at a whole lot of comparables, with one exception. I looked at El Cerrito when I was looking at how this payment out and give back worked, and they had the same rate of 16% increase plus a 12% give back. We don't have a database of comparable salaries to show this because that wasn't our focus. Our focus was to give a moderate increase with the cops giving back money towards their pension. That was always our focus. When we did the cough report in 2010, our officers were down on the bottom 1/3 of rankings. Now, we don't have a current ranking index that shows how they rank with comparables. We just didn't do that because that wasn't part of our task. Our task was to negotiate towards a contract where we gave and they gave back. So I don't know how these fit in. We do have comparable contracts from other districts, but to dig out the material is not an easy thing to do because there's a concept of total compensation over which you look, not just the salary you pay them. And in total compensation, they were still at the lower end as of 2010.
It seems to me, I might be wrong, please tell me if I am, but it seems to me that there is a 16% increase over 4 years, which means 4% a year, and the 3% or whatever it is, 3.25% that is being paid into the retirement that's being given, it's still taxpayer money that's that's paying for that. So, you know, it seems to me that 16% over 4 years or 4% a year in the current climate is a lot.
Well, let me kind of address that. First, it's not 4% a year. It's 3.75 in the first 2 years and 4.25 in the last 2 years. And the notion, again, is we're moving money across the table and they're moving it right back to us towards their PERS contribution. So you have to look at what the net difference is between the amount we're giving them and what they're giving us back, and that means actually about a 4% increase over 4 years, not 16. So the net cost is shifting money and they pay it towards their pension contributions, and that's actually what most districts do.
Well, I understand that that's the way it's structured, but it still seems to me that we are paying an additional 4% a year,
and they're giving back 3%. Again, let's don't use 4% because that's not the right number. 3.75% in the first 2 years.
Approximately.
Let's be exact because that's what we're dealing with here. 3.75% in the first 2 years and 4.25 in the last 2 years. Each year is matched with a 3% contribution by those officers towards their pension. Now, the last page of this handout does show you very carefully what the costs are. The cost of the district is $233,000 over 4 years. The officers' buyback is $280,000. They're paying towards their own pension costs. So if you weigh those two numbers together, I think it comes out to be a pretty good deal. And the notion of paying out and paying back is actually kind of the standard in other cities. It's not the exception. So yeah, there's taxpayer money going out and it's coming right back towards the PERS contribution. It's money we don't have to pay towards PERS. They're paying it.
No, I understand that structure. But it says here over 4 years.
That's right.
The MOU is 16% gross pay increase, and but it's still a 4% increase, an average of 4% over 4 years, okay?
Dr. Schwartzberg, I'm going to make you say 3.75% to be extremely accurate because you have to be. You can't code it to make it sound worse because it's not. This really is a good deal for the district. It does require, it shifts off of our books the obligation to pay that 9% contribution, that employer-paid member contribution. The officers will be paying it, and they'll be paying all of it, and it's not just the 9%. At the end of the 4th year, they'll be paying 12%.
Per year?
12% at the end of the 4th year. At the start of the 4th year, that's what they'll pay. That's their member contribution towards their pension.
Per year.
Remember, it ratchets up. We're phasing out our contribution from 9% down to 0. They're going from 0 to 12%.
So
there's a step increase each year, so the 4th year will be 12%, right?
Yeah.
That they will be paying.
After that, it's a little complicated, and maybe I'm rounding the corner too much. Since I'm expressing exactitude from you, I'll be exact. It is 12% of the normal, it's 50% of the normal cost subject to a 12% cap. So if the normal cost shoots up, they'll only pay 12%. Right now, the normal cost is about 27%. That's a term of art, and basically, this year, what do I have to pay these guys in present value dollars for a benefit down the road for this year's service in 25 or 30 years? It's an actuarial concept, and right now, the normal cost is about 27%. So they will always
13, and that's
they will always pay 12% if the normal cost stays at that rate.
So that would be if it were. Okay, I'm not going to belabor this, but I'm not at ease with the structure. It doesn't.
Again.
Okay. Well, wait. Any further comment?
Yeah. Oh, any further comments
from you?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, I think we're done then.
Thank you, Dr. Schwartzberg.
What is the reason for having the officers buy life insurance and then reimbursing them versus buying life insurance for all officers? I don't quite understand that.
You're going to have to point me where that language is in the contract.
It's page 4, and it's the bottom, life insurance.
I can take that one. So the contract used to just say we would provide life insurance.
Yes.
We wanted to be specific of how much we were going to contribute and what the cap was. So that's what we did.
Okay, so it was
adding certainty.
Okay. All right. Since we did a good job on that, what's the cost of D going to be?
Oops. D on
Page
what?
5.
Disability insurance.
Disability insurance. The district agrees to provide a disability benefit to California Law Enforcement Association. I actually don't know, but I think Lynn is helping me out here.
$245 per month.
Per employee?
No, for everybody.
Okay. I'm going to sit down.
All right, next, Mr. Watt.
Well, as you can see, there's a lot here for us to digest. Again, I think it would be appropriate if, rather than making that decision in December, if that decision were put off until January, just so that we can come back with some comments. You can consider those and then make your decision in January. That gives us a little time to maybe do our research. Because Mr. Welsh pointed out that I was coming at him at the last minute with some comments on the Bayview contract. Absolutely not true. That contract went online the first time a couple of weeks ago, and so I just want to have a little time to look at this. That's all. I'm not trying to come in and
well,
come up
you
with some
have it
stuff
right now.
Now that's just what I'm asking for. I did have one comment, and as I think I understood you, and this has to do with Len's comment. You talked about the fact that over the 4 years, the employees, the policemen, will be going from 0 to 12%. Did I hear you say that 12% is a state mandated requirement at that time?
Not until 2018.
2018, whereas
after our contract, it's a state mandated. Our contract takes them up to what the state requires as of January 1st of 2018.
Whereas,
It takes them up in gradual steps to that, yes.
yeah, but this is over 4 years, so that's 2018,
Yeah.
right? So
Yes.
it gets to the state mandated requirement.
Exactly right.
I'm just simply saying you are basically taking it up to where the state is going to require you to be. Is
That's
that
right.
correct? Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that that was clear.
You're clear.
And we're doing it early. 'cause
Pardon?
And we're doing it early. We're having them contribute earlier than they otherwise would have to. They don't have.
Well,
Right, we could have waited until 2018 to
And then
change
hit
the
them
game.
with a 12%? I don't know that they would have liked that, but okay.
But they wouldn't have had a choice.
Exactly.
I understand.
Thank you.
I wasn't sure if average pay was in the definitions and if average pay includes overtime. And second question was, and I can sit down after that, does it make sense to run this stuff by the Finance Committee at all?
Well, Carl already asked for that, and we hadn't even thought about doing that. I mean, it's a question for Lynn if he wants to have the Finance Committee chew on this.
We can certainly look at it.
I don't know when your Finance Committee is scheduled to meet again.
We actually, Greg, what's our tentative date? Next Thursday.
Well, okay, so it sounds like you're going to be looking at it. And the average pay issue, Steve, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch what that...
Well, I just was asking if the definition included...
Where are you looking at in the agreement?
No, I'm just wondering. I can't remember the whole thing, but I was wondering that you mentioned the average pay that the average pay. So I was wondering the average pay, because it doesn't seem like overtime the average pay. But some communities, they back up the overtime, and then that's part of overtime. That's what's average.
Well, again, I'd have to look at what constitutes pensionable compensation. I don't know off the top of my head.
So my question is, it's what...
Little closer to the mic, please.
I can't hear you, Simon.
Is that better? Sorry.
That's great.
Okay. My question is, where's the $233,000 going to be coming from? How
Well,
are
we
going
just saved
to-
$100,000 tonight with our RFP not being done.
Okay, that's fine, but then where's the money coming from?
With luck, we won't have legal fees next year. We won't have legal fees thereafter. That will be coming out of our budget. We're going to have to pay for this. There's no question about it.
I'm not...
I don't know what the average amount per year is going to be.
Okay.
But we're going to have to find the cost savings in our budget to pay for this.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you're saying the plan is to find, with the existing budget, to find cost savings to pay for this?
Well, the other part of that is we don't know what revenue is going to be either. You know, there's a certain amount of you don't know what it's going to be. So obviously we have to be oriented towards saving money. But by the same token, as we know each year what our revenue stream is, then we keep adjusting.
I guess I'm wondering, and maybe this is part of where the Finance Committee comes in, is understanding better what the plan is for making that revenue available. Right.
Well, we're at the mercy of the county and the revenue. You know, you may not know this, and many people here may not, but the last county assessor, as part of his election campaign, voluntarily cut everybody's property taxes down and reassessed the values down. You talk about buying an election. This guy really reassessed the properties down and cost every community in Contra Costa County a good 10 to 15% of their property tax revenues. Now that's slow. You have to hear this because part of this is a structural change the county imposed upon us by reducing the property taxes due to the recession. Now those taxes are slowly climbing back up. We aren't guaranteeing they'll be back up sufficient to cover this. We're going to have to look for other ways to cover it. We don't intend to make this be the cause of a deficit, but in fairness to the officers, we do want this to be an incentive for them to stick with our district. San Jose's lost 30% of its officers because of pension issues. They're just leaving. You know, they vote with their feet. So we have an obligation to give as good a benefit as we can to our officers and to find a way to pay for it out of our current revenues.
And I'm not trying to deny anything you're saying. I just want to make sure that that's part of this plan is not only do we finalize a contract at some point that deals with the money that's going to be spent, but we also have to understand fully where that money's coming from. And
no question about it.
I haven't heard any discussion about that, and you know what? I just want to make sure that's on the table. Thank you.
More questions?
Anybody else? Come on up, Celia.
I wonder if
If the district, if
A little closer to the mic, please.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you really got to get close. It's unnatural, but that's what you got to do.
maybe I'll just speak up in a louder voice.
No, get up. You're real close there.
I'm just wondering whether or not there was any effort to look at what the fire department was doing in terms of making its
the fire department
compensation package.
They got an 8% raise.
But they also had to pay 9%, to make a 9% contribution.
I think if you look at what the fire contract did, they're at 16% out and 17% out and 12% back. It's the same ratio. They're paying more and getting it back in the form of this pension contribution. That is the norm, not the exception. So I think El Cerrito is the same way. Again, for those of you who don't know, Kensington contracts with El Cerrito for its fire service. So you're looking at the El Cerrito contract. And there is, in July, they actually did come back and they made similar changes to the fire department that they made to the police department. And it may be a 17% increase over 4 years with a 12% give back, but it's in the same general market of 16 or 17% out and 12% back. The first year is 8% out and 9% back.
Yes.
3 years.
And then four officers down.
I guess to answer your question, Celia, you wanted us to compare ourselves with the fire department. I think they're about the same.
I'm asking if you looked at that.
Well, we did. The answer is yes.
There were a number of things that I found out that seem not to be the same with the contract that we have now that's coming up. And what I...
Go ahead.
I think Stephen asked whether or not overtime was being included.
Yeah, I just don't have an answer for that. Again, the definition of what's considered pensionable compensation is really, they've clamped down on what that is. There's also a cap on how much can be pensionable. I just don't have the numbers right now. Well,
in the police department as well. The police department? It's not. Okay.
Yeah. Look up Google PEPRA, P-E-P-R-A, and you'll see what the new law requires. Public Employees Pension Reform Act.
If people want to make comments, why don't you come over here and then you can just step up when you're ready, when Celia's finished.
I also inquired about whether retirement benefits, including health benefits, were given to retirees, to families.
They are.
And I was told...
On that, because we actually looked closely at that, and what we realized is that most people don't have dependents at the time they retire that would qualify under the plan.
Well, what I was told was that I asked the question, do retirement benefits include health benefits for an employee and his family?
It's actually, the short answer is yes, they do. We pay for a retiree benefit.
We do.
The district does.
But the fire department doesn't.
I don't know that.
That's the answer that I was given.
I just don't know that.
So it's a substantial amount of money.
Well, again, Celia, to back up just a little bit here, current retirees, we don't think we can change anything
I
about.
understand that.
They may have a legally vested right and we can't change it. Future retirees, providing for a spouse and a family is a question of a negotiation. And we negotiated back and forth on that very issue. And the answer we came up with is providing a benefit for the retiree and his dependents at that point in their life.
So this is a change, then. This is not the same as the fire department.
Well,
we don't know. We'll have to look into the fire department. Yeah. I don't think any of us here know whether that's actually true or not. So we'll look into that.
Yeah,
okay.
You might look into that.
One thing we did do for new hires again. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say for new hires, we did change the amount of time they have to work for the district to get a retirement health benefit, and how long they have to work for PERS, which again PEMCA severely limited us on.
Yeah, so it goes from 50 years to 57?
That's something different. We're talking retirement health benefit versus pension benefits that they get. It's hard to keep straight, but the pension benefits, new employees have to, if they retire at the age of 57, they get 2.7% per year of each year of service towards their pension. Right now, you can retire at 50 with 3% a year. It's 3 at 50. And the state legislature passed that in its infinite wisdom back in the 90s when the stock market was going out of this world and everything else was skyrocketing in value. No one ever thought those days would end. Well, they did. So now they've realized that was too generous a benefit, and they're ratcheting that back for the retiree pension costs. Retiree health costs are another issue entirely, and those are controlled, again, by what I call PIMCA, the Public Employees Medical Health and Hospital Care Act. And that limits the kind of benefit you can give to retirees. There's basically 2 tracks of benefit available to them. And you can stay in PIMCA and use those 2 tracks and the vesting for them and the benefit they give, or you can leave PIMCA and try to get a cafeteria-style plan. Cafeteria-style plan is, there's no guarantee that's going to be cheaper, and there's every consideration about that same potential vested rights issue.
So folks, I would just ask...
Hold on. We're at 9:45. We need to decide whether we want to continue beyond 10.
Think about this. Oh.
Do I have do I have a motion to continue beyond 10?
Continue the meeting beyond 10 o'clock for as long as necessary to finish the business.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
What? You want to...
I know it's been popular since certain events to just extend the meeting indefinitely. I think the whole point of having a time limit to the meeting was to give the public a chance, a thought that I don't have to stay here till 1 or 2 in the morning, which some districts do.
Why is that a problem, Avery?
Well, you know, as you get older, you want to go to bed, and if you're younger, you've got kids that you've got to get up and get to school. But anyway, I think it is more appropriate in a better spirit to put a time limit, say 10:30 or 11, but rather than just say till all the work is done,
well,
because
I guess we have a more eager...
Well, wait a minute. So anything else to comment?
No.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Let's move on.
Vote.
Well, we still
have to take our vote.
We have to take our vote here.
All right, all in favor?
Until business is done.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Please continue, Celia.
Okay, Celia.
Just wanted to end with my request that you do look into what the fire department is doing. You may choose not to follow what they're doing, but it was my understanding that retirees did not get health insurance. And
we'll find out.
Or their families.
I think they get a health plan. That's always been a strong...
We'll find out. We don't need to debate it now. We don't know the answer. Let's move on.
We're not speculating here while 50 or 60 people sit here.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Paula Black. I just have a couple of questions, hi. I'm Paula Black.
Paula Black, thank you.
Yes. I had a couple of questions just around how you analyze the numbers, which I hope will be helpful for people going away and thinking about the net cost. And it really is around the cost of new officers versus current officers, and whether that actually affects what your assumptions were, and whether I'm right in assuming that new officers are less expensive for the district.
Let's answer the second question first. New officers are less expensive for the district. They'll have the same pay raise, but they'll have a different pension schedule going into and a different health plan retirement benefit going into. Those both save the district money. Now, as far as I know, the chart that Greg provided to me does not take into account new officers. It's just using the current historic 9-person force plus the chief. The 9-person force, excuse me. So it doesn't take into account new officers. This is, shall I say, the worst case scenario where we to keep the officers for the next 5 years, as an example. There's all kinds of ways to run these numbers, but we chose kind of a basic method that would show you what the cost would be for the current force we have.
So this is the conservative case.
Pardon me?
I said, so this is the conservative
Yes, it
case.
is.
To the
Yeah.
extent you have any attrition, you would expect to see
Right.
that number go down.
That's right.
Are there numbers also available for the projected health and medical costs? I mean, I totally understand about the unpredictability of health insurance, but are we able to see what the assumptions are that you've made?
I don't have an answer for that. The healthcare costs, there was some discussion that the premium costs had gone down, but again, this goes back to PIMCA and our using a service. PIMCA, again, provides these 2 tracks of retirement benefit vesting. It also requires you use their health plan costs, and I don't know how they project out their health plan costs. We can probably find out, but again, if you accept PIMCA as your health plan source, whatever they do, you're bound to.
So your assumed health and medical costs, both for current and the retiree plans, are PIMCA costs. So they're publicly available?
Yeah, they are available. But I think also in our contract, I think we have a cap on $1,600 a month maximum. So regardless of what the costs are above that, we only pay up to $1,600. So that may help give you some framework. I think that's right. But again, PIMCA is it's another agency unto its own. And I just don't know how they project out their costs. We can find out.
No, I'm more interested in just what you are assuming.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're assuming the PIMCA schedule and they make that available to you, however they make it available.
We'll have to ask.
Okay.
Just for quick clarification, we usually get notified about a year in advance only for the upcoming guesstimate that they have for what our health care costs will be. Historically, since I've been here, they've been double-digit increases, running about 10, 11, 12% each year.
Yeah.
This current year, I guess the first full year after the Affordable Health Care Act went through, it reduced down to, I think it was about a 5% increase in our health care costs, which we use in this current budget. And we have been notified that they're estimating now that the upcoming year, the 15-16 budget, they're expecting our health care costs to go down about 5%. But that's just early estimate.
So at the moment, the budgeting on the healthcare costs is a bit of a lottery.
I'm sorry?
I said, so at the moment, the budgeting on the healthcare costs is a bit of a lottery. It's pretty unclear.
It's hard to predict the future, yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Good questions.
Chuck, could I please ask you about what the 20% average is the average of? 27%, you said, I think?
I'm sorry, you're going to have to help me out, Dr. Schwartzman.
You said something, you can call me Leonard.
Okay, I'll call you Leonard. But what's your question again?
You said that you put out the figure 27%.
Oh, that's the normal cost, and that's the term of art relating to, if I work this year, how much in present value dollars do I need to set aside for my retirement based on this year's of service? This year's service. That's 27% right now.
And that is the employee's contribution?
No, the employee's contribution is going to be, under our proposal here, in the 4th year of the contract, they will be paying 50% of that normal cost up to a cap of 12%. So
Okay,
it's a ceiling.
But what does the 27%?
That's the normal cost. It's 27% of your payroll is what they have to set aside as the normal cost for a future benefit for your pension.
And
yeah, thank you.
27%, you have to charge it, or that's the total amount that has to be paid?
Well, set aside. You set aside 27%, and that's going to go to retirement.
So the district has to set aside.
Well, no, that's the whole point. In 2018, the employee will have to pay 50% of that, and the district will pay the other 50% of the 27%.
Okay, so by 2018, it's going to be 50-50 in terms of the contribution to...
Correct. 12%. And the difference between the two, 15%.
It's a cap of 12%.
Cap of 12. It's 50% of the normal cost with a cap of 12%.
So if the normal cost is 35%, they'll be paying the 12%.
They'll be paying what?
Let's say, for example, the normal cost goes from 27% to 35%. Half of that is 17%, but there's a 12% cap. They won't pay beyond. The district pays the rest. That's state law.
The district pays the rest.
Yeah, that's state law. It's dense, and I wish I could break it down easier for you. I just have the basic understanding, but it's pretty complex.
In my little small mind, in the 4th year, they can pay up to a maximum of 12%.
And that's based on what the law will be at that time.
Yes.
Why is it now that?
No,
it's actually
2018.
The law now
No, it takes effect in 2018,
it
yes.
takes effect by 2018. They have to pay 50% of the normal cost, which today happens to be 27% of pensionable compensation, with a cap of 12%. Therefore, assuming it stayed at 27%, being the amount by actuarial standards that you had to lay away for this pension cost, for the pension cost for that employee, at that time, if it stayed at 27%, 12% would have to be paid by the employee and 15% by the district, and that is as a matter of law.
Thank you. That clarified that for me.
Very good.
My name is Nick Day. Just wanted to put a few things in perspective. First of all, I'd like to say I think this is a very good proactive first step. I mean, we are not just in the same, we are in the same boat as many other cities, and in fact private companies. I remember something like GM is 12 billion in underfunded liabilities, and altogether in this country it's well over 100 trillion, which is just totally mind-boggling. And it's not just this country, it's other countries as well. I left PG&E about 1997 when I could see they were going bankrupt, and I get a pension from them, not maximum, but I just found out that new employees to PG&E will get no pension whatsoever, and this is the way things are going these days. So everything will be moved over to personal responsibility of 401k and IRAs, and that's the way it'll work, and that looks like, in a way, the way we're going here. And so I think this is a good first step, and obviously one can't go that far, but of course PG&E may well be saying to themselves, will we be able to attract good employees, giving them no pension whatsoever? But as I say, this will be actually going over to personal responsibility for each employee to fund their own through a 401k. Thank you.
Makes a good case for high wages.
Are there any other questions or comments? I know this is very dense, and I've tried to be as straightforward on it as possible. It just, you have to wrap your arms around it and really look at it a lot.
I don't want to second good law request that we be given an extra month to chew on this and go into it and really understand it. Because it is so dense and it is so...
We're not prepared to do that. We've got a month. We're way overdue to get this contract in place, and a month is plenty of time to look at this. You know, we are elected to do the business of the district, and to a certain extent you have to let us do the business of the district. We're giving you a full month to look at this. Welcome to ask questions along the way, but we have to move on with this. That is our plan, yes. Yeah, I mean, you can submit suggestions all along between now and next meeting.
You all know how to use email.
Yeah, that's for sure.
No shortage on the email.
All right, are we ready to move on?
Any more questions on this, folks?
I would make one comment while the Paula is coming up, and that is, please be careful, because this is extremely complicated in terms of the retiree benefits and the health benefits. It seems easy to say, well, just do this, but the law is extremely complicated. You cannot believe the hours of conversation we've had trying to figure out what we can do, what we can't do, what the limitations are, what the potential liability is. And I know that people hate having lawyers on the board, but this is probably one time when it was quite helpful to have two lawyers listening to people talk gobbledygook. I finally dropped out and let Chuck do it, because it was way out of my pay grade.
Go ahead.
Thanks very much for those comments, because I do think that given the complexity of the contract and of the legal issues, given we have a contract that's very important to our community, it's the bulk of the budget that you guys have, it impacts on legislative responsibilities. We have 2 new board members coming on board between now and the next meeting. And my concern is, given that this is a period of transition, that if you're expecting to receive comments from the members of the public, to which I'm sure you'd like to respond and explain, that the new board members are incorporated in that process, because we're going to be asking them to be voting on something next month that they haven't had the benefit of the time.
Well, they're going to have a full month like everybody else.
So I guess my first question is, if you're expecting community feedback to happen between now and the vote next month, how are you going to involve the new board members to ensure that they are part of that process?
They feedback like everybody else in the community.
No, I understand that, but I'm assuming that, let's say I have a comment and I email a comment to you. I mean, how does that process work outside of this room? And how are you going to make sure that Vanessa and Rochelle are appraised of those comments and those responses?
One of the issues affecting this district is the Brown Act. We can't act independently of a public meeting on anything. Any comments coming in, you can send them in as early and as often as you want, but as a board, we can't even discuss them in public until the next meeting. That's just the requirements of our Brown Act.
Can you discuss them in private? So,
nope.
So you're expecting...
Finish your question. What were you trying to ask?
So I'm trying to understand the process in which we have 2 new board members voting on the single most important contract that our community is going to enter into, which Patricia's already pointed out to us is complex. It's a complex negotiation. It's an important contract. It has a lot of legal ramifications at the legislative level. How the 2 board members who have not had the benefit of being part of the process for the last 6 months in the way that the existing board members have had, how are they going to be brought up to speed such that they feel they can vote next month and we can feel confident that they're making an informed vote?
So I have an answer to that. One, part of what the 2 new board members are going to have to understand is that there's a lot of time that you spend that is not in meetings. And so they're here tonight. They can take the contract home. They can look at it. They can certainly email and ask questions of board members if they have those questions. Secondly, I think your point is a good one, that if questions come in from the public or comments from the public, that maybe we should just forward them on to Vanessa and Rochelle so that they'll have the opportunity to see those questions as well, or those comments as well. I think that's a fair comment. The reason that I think we're trying to hold firm to the vote in December, and I would say, at least for me personally, if something came up that required me to really rethink it, I'm not stuck on December, but police officers have been waiting for a long time. The pay is not retroactive, and so it would be another month that they aren't getting a pay increase, and that I think is unacceptable given what the concessions that they've made in the contract to us and the time it's taken us to negotiate. So that's part of what you're seeing, is an urgency to get this passed so that they can know exactly what they can expect for their families, just as you'd want to know for your family in the coming months. So that's the urgency. But I think none of us are going to vote in a contract if something major came up and someone said, oh my God, this is the most ridiculous thing you could ever do, here's a problem. I think we're all going to consider that. We're reasonable people.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'll just ask a question relevant to that. So if people write to you with questions and you say you're going to forward the questions on to the 2 new board members, and I presume they're going to come to all of you, are you going to give a response to any of those questions? And would that be shared with the 2 new board members?
No. Those questions will come in. Everybody will get to see them. To the extent they're live questions at the next meeting, people can ask them, and we can answer to the extent we
okay, but
choose.
For the email questions that come in, you won't be, I'm not going to say never, but you in general won't be making a response to that question to that person.
No, unless that person wants to come to the next meeting and ask the question, or pursue what was said in email.
Again, it's the Brown Act. We can't help that.
Well,
I thought, you know the Brown Act. We have to stick by it.
I'm not disputing that, but I'll ask for a little clarification then. I thought that it was that more than 2 of you, more than 2 of you couldn't get together and discuss things. But if I came up to you, accosted you on the street and asked you a question, you're likely to answer me, right? Maybe
well,
not.
maybe yes or maybe no, but we can't institutionalize that. We all have other things we have to do. I have a committee meeting next week, a finance committee meeting. We have other things we have to do. We can't add into our workload answering people's individual emails.
Well,
we have a process for this.
Okay, I'm just trying to clarify what's
Maybe
feasible.
There's a more important issue on this, and that is we won't know among us which of us has answered. And so it doesn't work to answer the individual emails.
Oh, well, that's
we
interesting.
Can't do it. We can't make an answer to the community like that. It wouldn't be fair.
Gail Feldman. Thank you for providing some numbers. I'm glad that's added to the conversation tonight. And again, I would be one of the members of the community asking for more time to review the financial impacts of the decision about the contract. And the reason, as I've been saying for the last couple of months, is that you're already in a deficit. You have a structural deficit, and you're going forward with addressing some of the issues related to that. As you know, 80% of the budget is the police services, and that includes the salaries of the officers and the benefit package. But you already have a structural deficit, and I know there's been some conversations that you have other reasons for having a deficit in the last 2 years, including the lawsuit. But even with the cost of the lawsuit, you have a structural deficit. It's over $100,000 this last year, and you're projecting it at the same level this year. On top of it, now you're entering into agreement that you're going to increase costs, although obviously if these numbers are correct, you're taking a big step towards controlling those. But you know that there are other issues that are related to your retiree health that you had never budgeted in the past, that all of a sudden in 2013 you picked up $200,000 in cost. So the big question is that, for transparency's sake, the community needs to know that if you put another $200,000, $300,000 of cost onto the district, you're going to have to find the revenue for it. And your choices are pretty slim, because typically you have basically the property tax and the special taxes. So I think it's only fair to taxpayers in the community to know that part of the balancing of this is either you guys want to pay a certain level to your officers, and it's going to cost us in our taxes. And we're already paying over $500 in extra taxes just for police. So I think it would be better to take your time, be transparent about what this is actually going to translate to in possible taxes down the road. Thank you.
I just want to say 2 things. There's nothing untransparent about this process. Nothing. We have been completely above board about how we're doing things. We're giving the month advance notice this time in response to complaining before that when we voted on something we didn't give a month's advance notice. Now people are saying, how about 2 months? We have to run the business of the community. The other thing I want to say is, I don't know what is meant by the term structural. To me that no, I don't want an answer from you. I'm commenting, okay? To me, that means that there is something that is built into the structure of the budget that's going to force us into a deficit every single year, and that simply is not the case. The money we're talking about, the expense we totaled for you, the anticipated expense over 4 years, is a 4-year figure. The 2,000, what was it, Chuck?
$233,000.
$233,000. That's over 4 years. All we have to do is not get sued for a few years, and we're going to be in great shape, believe me. The structural deficit we had this time around was because of litigation. So that's all I have to say about that.
And I want to add one thing onto that. Gail, you're right. We do pay for our police services. That's because we, as a community, have voted that we want to have a local police department that's filled with the highest caliber officers that we can have. So yes, we do pay for that. That is one of the reasons why this district exists. And so the fact that it's going to cost you tax dollars to pay to have this service, that's what we did. We voted several years ago, and 2/3 of the community said they were in favor of doing that. So there may be some outliers out there. There may be a majority that don't want to do that anymore. But right now, we're operating under the mandate of the community, that this is what they want. This is the primary reason we exist.
I just want to make a comment. I did ask for the detail of the fees for the legal services on the writ. Because this issue had come up before, that the whole reason there's a structural deficit is because of the legal cost. They definitely have caused part of the deficit during the last couple of years, but the legal fees did not equal the amount that the district was short last year. Last year you were short $263,000. Your legal fees were like $168,000. So there's still another $100,000 that you were short. That means structurally bringing in less revenue than expenses. I mean, it's not really anything too scientific thing.
Anybody else? Okay, let's move on to the next item. Lynn, will you please brief the board on item 3? Oh, yes, let's take a break. Let's take a 5-minute break. Good move. Get through the rest of the meeting.
They were a lot briefer. The meeting started, the meeting was adjourned.
Oh, what? Thank you very much.
She's a woman of many talents.
Whistle, Brooklyn.
Okay, I think we're moving on to item 3 of the new business agenda. And Lynn, are you ready to brief the board on this?
I am. Okay, the agenda item has to do with a proposed agreement between the Services District and the West Contra Costa Unified School District. I'm going to read the memo for those of you in the community who don't have board packets so that you understand what the background was that led up to this agreement being drafted. 20 years ago, when the school district was in the throes of financial duress, it stopped funding the crossing guard at the intersection of Arlington Avenue and Kensington Park Road / Rincon Avenue. Later, it stopped providing coverage with its own police force for the Kensington Hilltop School. Since then, the KPPCSD has provided these services and has absorbed these costs. During the past 5 years, the Kensington Police Department's patrols and calls for service for issues including things like arson and vandalism have averaged 600 per year, with each call requiring about 30 minutes. This has translated into an average of 300 hours per year and has redirected Kensington Police Department resources, both human and financial, from its own jurisdiction to that of the school district. Additionally, each year, the KPPCSD absorbs approximately $10,000 of cost providing the Arlington Avenue crossing guard. At the Services District's July 11, 2013 meeting, WCCUSD board member Charles Ramsey reported that as a result of recent changes in the way California was funding schools, the school district would see a doubling of revenues within 6 years, and that it was enjoying its largest reserve in the school district's history of $23 million. Mr. Ramsey also reported, quote, "The superintendent, in light of what happened in Newtown, wants to make sure we don't leave any community without enough public safety. So I welcome your chief to at least give me some idea of what we can do to enhance what you're doing here to help work with this local community," end quote. In response to this invitation, then KPPCSD Board President Tony Lloyd, Sergeant Keith Barrow, and I met to analyze services provided to the school district's Hilltop School. From this analysis, a proposal was developed and then presented to the school district superintendent, Bruce Harder, and board member, Madeline Cronenberg, on November 5th, 2013. At the service district's November 6th, 2013 meeting, President Tony Lloyd reported on the November 5th proposal to the school district and let the board know that there would be follow-up meetings on this matter. There was no opposition expressed by the board or the community at that time. In early March 2014, Director Tony Lloyd received a phone call from the school district's board president, Charles Ramsey, letting him know that at its March 12, 2014 board meeting, President Ramsey would be presenting for an up or down vote a proposal for the school district to enter into a partnership with the services district. President Ramsey indicated that there would be time on the agenda for Kensington to make a presentation, and he asked that Director Lloyd bring 2 others with him for this purpose. Director Lloyd, Police Chief General Manager Harmon, and I attended the meeting and made that presentation. On March 12, 2014, in response to President Ramsey's proposal to enter into a partnership with the services district, the school board voted unanimously to support President Ramsey's proposal of a partnership in which the school district would resume funding for services it had paid for in the past, but it had to abandon providing when the school district was in the throes of financial distress. The approved motion authorized the school district to enter into an agreement to provide up to $50,000 per year for 3 years to the services district. On March 13, 2014, Mr. Ramsey attended the services district's board meeting and addressed the board and the community about this proposed agreement. Among the points he made, the passage of Proposition 30 had added $12.5 million to the school district's operating budget. Governor Brown's local control funding formula had provided additional significant operating funds. The school district had $24 million in unallocated reserves. It was important to accomplish things for all parts of the school district. Other schools and geographic areas within the school district were already receiving funds for police services and safety. On July 29, 2014, the services district submitted a proposed agreement to Dr. Bruce Harder, the school district superintendent. On October 8, 2014, Dr. Harder returned the agreement with his signature. On October 9, 2014, Dr. Harder made a presentation at the service district's board meeting. He reported on the school district's good financial status and said that because safety was an important priority, the school district was entering into partnerships with police agencies. The school district's school resource officers' 2014-2015 budget is $3,064,500. In addition to Kensington, this will provide funding for Hercules at $320,000, San Pablo $136,000, the Contra Costa County Sheriff at $257,000, El Cerrito, $520,000, Richmond, $1,326,000, and Pinole, $480,000. Kensington's budgeted allocation equals less than 2% of this line item in the school district's budget. Since October 9th, the school district has contacted the services district twice, asking us to return the fully executed contract. For the board's consideration at tonight's meeting, staff has prepared the draft agreement between the services district and the school district. Before it was sent to the school district, our legal counsel reviewed the proposed agreement, and the proposed agreement is presented tonight for board discussion and possible approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Any comments from board members on this? Go ahead.
Okay. I think it's a good idea. Initially, when I first heard it, I didn't think it was a great idea. I thought that school monies shouldn't be diverted. I didn't realize there was such an extraordinary excess, nor did I have an historical background on it that I came to know shortly thereafter, and that is that in fact we had taken over that duty when they were in rough times, and then here we were in some more rough times, similar rough times, and all that was really happening is we were going back to what had been before, and that the school district could well afford it. And so I applaud both Tony and Lynn and Sergeant Barrow for going through with it and coming up with this contract. So thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I want to echo that. You know, this was something that Tony and Lynn jumped on right away, long time ago, and I think actually this would have come to us sooner if Tony hadn't been out sick. We didn't want this to go forward until he was here. And I'm certainly glad that we get this done before the board changes its composition. It's a nice sort of final legacy, I think, Tony, for you to leave us. So thanks to all of you, Keith, too, for doing this. Any comments from the public? Or Tony, you want to?
This isn't as much about my involvement, because Lynn did most of the work, quite frankly. But I think what it demonstrates is there are unique ways. We talked about revenue shortfalls earlier tonight. We talked about ways of improving our financial situation, and there are unique ways, business applications out there, and they just need exploring and developing. We've got relationships, in this case, the president of the school board, with Dr. Harder, who was the superintendent of the school system, and Madeline Cronenberg was on the board. They understand what it takes to run a school system. They understand the importance of children's safety on campus and what that does overall. And so it really wasn't that tough a sell. Keith put together a great presentation, and Lynn put together the background, and we just went there and we told them our story. And the story was that historically we were doing work for the school system that you know, we were paying for, and they really needed, and historically they paid for it, and that we really needed to they really needed to take that back over and expand it some, if at all possible. They clearly saw the merit in that type of proposal. You know, and the funny thing is we asked for $30,000 and we got $150,000. So I guess we told a compelling story. I'm not sure, but the point is that there are other like opportunities that surround us with various vendors and various suppliers, and I think that this district needs to look in the future how to develop those opportunities and relationships, because it may be just the next $150,000, $200,000, $300,000, you know, away from happiness in you know, we're talking about being short $233,000 for a program for our pension fund. Well, that, you know, that would go a long way towards negating that upward pressure. So that's where I think the real value in this thing is. The way we did something unique has to do with security on campus, so the children benefited, the school systems benefited, and we benefited in terms of enhancing and building a relationship. And I dare say that, you know, a year or so, if the district supports this and continues to work this, that, you know, who's to say that we don't go back to them and we don't get $200,000 or $300,000 like Richmond or El Torito High or one of the other schools. It's just a matter of putting your needs on the table and being able to substantiate it with good business rationale. So I was really happy to be part of the team that made that thing happen, that this whole thing happened. So we'll look forward to the next time.
Well, there's a 3-year structural change to our budget. Come on up.
We actually need you at the mic because that's the only way we can record your voice.
Yeah, if you want to be immortal, you got to speak to that mic.
So I was just about to date myself and say, as someone who was at Hilltop when the kids were the crossing guards in a bygone era, I really appreciate this. As someone who lives on Arlemont just above Highland, who has seen, I think Chief Hartman knows about this, who's seen some really close calls and some actual hits up there, I'm really happy about this, and I just want to bring up the idea that if the school district's really taking it over, they never were supposed to have drop-offs on the north side of Hilltop, but it's a routine drop-off with routine kid traffic up there. And I have actually witnessed a kid do this as a car came around the corner and the car touched the kid's hand because the kid didn't know what else to do. There are not always parents out there. Right now, that's a parent man stop. So it's catch as catch can. So if the school district really wants to take it over, there were 3 places the school district, now we're talking old history, took Arlington and the one everyone knows by the library, and then the 2 intersections up at the top on the 2 sides of school. So that goes back a long, long ways. That was the Richmond Unified. But there is still an issue there, and it's a difficult one for, I think, the police force to cover on the morning grounds in particular. So I just wanted to bring it up and say that, you know, if you have a chance, that's a place that if the school district is willing to fund, I think kid safety would be greatly benefited.
Thank you for that insight.
I applaud any time we can get something out of the West County School District, but we shouldn't look at it as a gift. We probably provide more per capita, per household, on average than any other city in the district. And we have one little school, and I think they forget about us. And when they were having the tough times, some of it because two times $2 million walked off, and their poor management, and I applaud getting it. And I'm just hoping that Mr. Ramsey and the other person involved, I don't know how you say it. You know, they're under investigation by the SEC. That's not us. That's federal. I hope that it'll still continue, that this agreement can go forward. I just have a couple of questions, and that is, will the $50,000 cover our costs? That's kind of a key. And the number of days, the money seems about right, but the number of days seems a little off. They're giving us, let's see. Sorry, I have too many notes on my piece of paper here. It says basically 15 hours per month, roughly 45 hours, and from what you put together, we spend like 75 hours a quarter. No, 45 hours a quarter. and then we spend about 75 hours a quarter on average, is what your numbers came out to be if I broke it down. So I'm just wondering, but the money's about right. I mean, the amount, if you take the 105 times that amount, even what we spend, we should be in line.
Yeah, we're pretty good at budgets and the money covers.
Yeah, so am I.
Well, additionally, this is viewed as sort of a pilot project, and that at the end of 3 years, we'll see how it's worked. Is the money right? As you can see tonight, there will be salary increases for our officers. So, of course, that if the arrangement continues past the 3 years, then we would need to increase the amount to reflect the hourly increase for our officers' time.
Right, because the actual officer's time is little. Is it greater than the amount of time the crossing guards spend? I would think it would be, but...
Well, there's several elements here, okay? One, there's the crossing guard and the hours there. There's also provision for basically an SRO or resource officer from the Kensington PD to help fund some of the calls we run up there on a daily basis. So that's why we only asked for 12,000 or something like that.
We asked for 30,000 a year, and they said up to 50 per year for 3 years.
Right. And the other thing that came out of this was they realized that they had to do more in terms of public safety for the students. So they were looking to carve out budget for electronic surveillance up at the school, for new fences and capital equipment, things that we didn't even ask for, but we were glad when we got on the subject that they were looking to put those in the budget. So the effect of the overall impact of our request actually goes beyond the $50,000 a year, because with the new fences, the new electronic surveillance, it makes they were going to change the surveillance on the north end of the school, which has always been, I've been up there 30 years with my kids, has always been uncovered. Those are all going to be the areas that they were going to look at to cover. So.
Well, that makes some sense. The thing, in my simple mind, I just look at it as we've had a constant expense when they sort of gave up doing it. And so we have the constant expense from the time period they stopped to now. So it's, I don't consider it a complete gift. I would consider it that they don't pay anything for us to do it.
This is not a gift at all.
Right, that's kind of what I'm getting at. I'm kind of happy to get some back, but I'm still a little concerned that we get enough, or our share, because like I said, I don't know, they forget about Kensington. I mean, even the county forgets about us. I have to tell them where I am half the time. Where do I, Kensington, where's that? Martinez hardly remembers where we're at. So anyway, thank you.
I was just going to add to this. This is really a way for us to recapture the cost of providing that police service to the largest nonprofit in town. For those of you who are familiar with Berkeley, the University of California is tax exempt. They don't support Berkeley services at all. That's why they have their own police force. Here, the school district doesn't really support our police force, or at least they didn't until now. So we're recapturing some of the cost we have to expend to protect their property and our students. So it's a reasonable trade-off. They're going to be paying us for, but the patrols we've been doing, Greg told me the officers have to go up there and sign in every day and walk through the campus, and they patrol it at night. So there's an incredible amount of service we provide that we haven't been being compensated for by a large tax-exempt group in our community. So it makes sense.
Do we need to vote to approve this?
Yes, we do. There is a contract on page 142 of the board packet, and it's already been signed by, I can't even read the name, but I guess the only thing that remains is for us to sign. So,
for us to approve and then sign.
Yes, approve, and so that I guess I would sign on behalf of the district. So do we have a motion?
I would direct the general manager to enter into agreement.
So, what do you think? You're the legal expert.
I would say to authorize the general manager, since Bruce Harder signed.
All right.
So I move that we adopt we instruct our general manager and chief of police, Greg Harmon, to enter into this agreement with the West County Unified School District for reimbursement of our costs for police services pursuant to this agreement.
I second the motion. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. And we move on to the final item of new business for tonight. Linda, would you please brief us all?
The final item of business is we've had several readings of, I think this is the third or fourth of Section 1000. I received no new comments on it in the intervening month or months. I did receive a comment relating to a different section, but because of the complexity of it, we were taking it section by section. So I guess you all have read it. I don't actually have to read the whole thing again, do I, Chief? No. So if anyone has further comment on it, please speak now or forever hold your peace.
I do.
Okay.
If you recall, at the last meeting, I said I would take responsibility for drafting some language to section 1030.30, I believe, which is at page 152. This is for non-police complaints, including complaints against the director. And I've raised a concern, and Celia, thank you for reminding me that I was supposed to do this. I've raised a concern about the process. So I would ask that we amend the process. The first sentence to read, non-police complaints, including complaints against the director, shall be resolved, or strike that, non-police complaints shall be resolved as follows, unless the complaint concerns the chief of police, general manager, or a director, or the chief of police, general manager, or another director. In that case, the citizen may direct the president of the board, may direct his complaint to the president of the board instead of following the procedure set forth below. The president of the board will inform the board of the complaint, and the board shall determine the proper way to address the complaint. The reason I think we need this is because I don't think we can have the chief of police, general manager investigating complaints against himself. And I think that there's potentially a problem that the board should at least weigh in on when a complaint is directed against the director, and the chief of police is, under the current policy, charged with investigating that. I just think it poses a conflict of interest in an unusual situation since the chief reports to the directors. So what I'm trying to do is provide a system whereby if someone chooses to, they can direct a complaint against the chief of police, general manager, or another director to the president of the board, and instead of following these procedures, and then the president of the board will decide with the rest of the board the proper way to address the complaint.
Okay, so do you want to talk about that language again? Do you want to?
Yeah. So
why don't you tell me what you're saying?
It would be non-police complaints against the chief of police, general, non-police complaints, and take out the words including complaints against the director.
Okay.
Shall be resolved as follows, unless the complaint concerns the chief of police / general manager or a member of the board of directors other than the president.
Unless the complaint
concerns the chief of police / general manager or another director except for the president.
Or another director other than the president. Okay, and then you'll have a separate section that says if the complaint concerns the chief of police / general manager or the president of...
No, or another director other than the president. I just put in that case because it's shorter.
But that doesn't follow if you put in that case, because you'll have non-police complaints shall be resolved as follows, unless the complaint concerns the COPGM or another director other than the president of the board. And then we go through the procedure.
No, period. then in that case, for this, what we just described, the citizen may choose to direct the complaint to the president of the board instead of following the procedure set forth below.
That doesn't follow.
Hold on. You've got this all written out, right? Yeah. So wouldn't it be enough for this meeting to explain the concept? I think you did that pretty well, and then you could give Linda the written language, and we can incorporate it.
Okay. I'll put it in. Sure.
Can I have a before you speak, the board gets its chance. Don't go away, though. I'll yield the floor to you. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
I know it's late. I hope you'll see this as a friendly question. But looking at the conflict of interest language, I'm really concerned that the definition of a conflict of interest is extremely wide, and that this actually makes the board very vulnerable, which, given the tensions that have existed in our community in the past, is not an unrealistic concern. Just so everyone knows, the definition of a conflict of interest says, I hope you can hear me, any actual, perceived, or potential conflict of interest in which it reasonably appears that a district board member's or employee's action, inaction, or decisions are or may be influenced by the board member or employee's personal or business relationships. So you're binding yourselves to a definition of conflict of interest that's immensely wider than, let's say, the state legislature binds themselves to. And the words that cause me particular concern are the notion of a potential conflict of interest. I'm also really uncomfortable with something that talks about your personal relationships. So just to give you a contrast, the California state legislature, it has to be an actual or perceived conflict of interest, and it has to be, the litmus test is whether it affects the financial interests of the legislator. And I just see the language as it's written at the moment as an invitation to nuisance suits against the board. And I would really hope that you would, before you pass this, take that back and look at it with your council.
This comes from our council.
Well, then as individual board members, I would be uncomfortable as a board member in our community with its history being subject to this.
It's the what policy?
The current policy.
Yeah. So I wanted to offer it up there because I think that we have people in our community, we have tensions in our community, we have language here that's extremely wide. I think the accusation of a conflict of interest is something that people tend to throw around anyway, and I think this is not a very tight definition. So.
We don't want it to be that narrow. We want it to be that if somebody is a relative and the relative could be involved in something that we could vote on, we don't want the person to vote on that. We have a policy. This policy comes from our council, and I am personally not troubled at all about what I should vote on and what I shouldn't vote on if I have a personal.
You don't think there's an argument to be made on that language that, let's say, if you'd accepted campaign contributions from someone in the community, that you would be subject to that? Because that would be a potential or perceived conflict of interest. That would be something where you have a personal relationship.
This is the policy we now have. This is the policy that came to us from our council. I am telling you that I'm not troubled by its breadth.
But Linda, you're leaving the board.
And this is the board's. This is the board's discussion to have. I understand what you're saying. You're saying it's a very broad definition, and you may find it uncomfortable if you're on.
I also, as a taxpayer in this community, are uncomfortable by the prospect of further lawsuits by disenchanted members of our community. So part of this is personal concern on your part. There's a very selfish concern at the heart of this, which is I don't want accusations of a conflict of interest being flung around and suits brought simply because you're using an older policy that is really wide. Actually, so that's my concern.
This is a new...
Hold on.
Oh, I went to the conflict of interest language is in 20, 1020?
Yeah, 1020.
Yeah,
point 20.
And then, oh, now I've just lost my page.
Point 31. I'm 10.
I went back about 3 pages from section
it's on
1000.
page 5 of this policy manual. And I'm going to chime in now and grab the floor back. I want to thank you for bringing this up, actually, because those allegations have already been slung around about potential conflicts of interest based on campaign contributions Pat Gillette and I received from the POA. And I'm not about to be sued again because people think my integrity has been compromised for a couple of dollars. So I agree with you on this particular issue. I think this does warrant going back to our board, our attorneys, to say, these are the circumstances that are developing under this very language. Is this what you guys intended?
Then you take it back.
I'd be happy to do that. I'm happy to do that.
And it looks like...
I think it's in everyone's interest. So
Yes.
I want to say also,
do that.
this is worth thinking about. It really is.
I'd like to think of us an upstanding community, but I'm not sure why we're holding ourselves to a higher standard than the state legislature.
As they say in the legal business, that assumes facts, not in evidence.
I was going to say, that does assume a great deal of facts, not evidence.
Having said that, just so we don't have a tacit admission here, I don't believe that accepting a campaign contribution.
No, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to imply that at all. I just said, that was one of the first things that came. We're a very small community. Everyone's relationships are personal. I mean, that's the upside of this. I think that's also a vulnerability under this language.
Thank you. Now, can we go back to Pat's idea here? Since you brought it up, I'm not a big fan of changing the language on that particular section. I think it works. If people go to the police chief with a complaint, he can weigh the merits. If they don't like what he says, they go right to the board. And that's so neat and so elegant. They always have the right to go to the board, and frankly, they always have the right to bring any kind of other administrative actions they want. But I think the current system really works. I think someone's setting up a trap here to trap the unwary on this. I think that if people bring a complaint to the chief or against any particular director, they can go to that particular person, deal with it, and if it's not resolved, they can go to the board. That's how it's worked.
The reason I think it's necessary is that we have compulsory language. Non-complete police complaints, including complaints against the director, shall be resolved as follows, meaning this is the procedure you have to follow. I just think if I'm someone who wants to complain about the chief, and I'm told the first thing I have to do is go to the chief, it just seems like it's a conflict of interest. He's conflicted and it's uncomfortable, and I may not raise my complaint. So what I'm trying to do is the least intrusive process by just saying there is an alternative. If you don't feel comfortable complaining about the chief, not that anyone ever would, but complaining about the chief to the chief, that you should have an alternative, and the alternative should be that you can go to the president of the board of directors. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to complicate it, which is why I said the board then can decide whether it thinks the chief should investigate it or it should be handled some different way.
So you're going to send language to that effect?
I will.
And I'm going to type it in, and that will be my last act on the policy manual. And I assume someone else will deal with the conflict of interest, or shall I do that too? Send it off to the lawyers and say, I am informed that this is too wide?
Yes.
Maybe. I feel like that was a well thought out comment, and I'd be happy to work with Pat a little bit on trying to hone that definition. For one thing, I always hate it when they define the word with the word, right? A conflict is a potential conflict, right away it's like, So that definition could be smithed a bit, so maybe we can do that together. Is that okay with you, Chuck?
Yeah, it's fine. I just don't want us to be set up for something that had good intentions at the outset is used as a sword against us. Lord knows we've already been through that a couple of times.
Right.
I don't want to give anybody else another chance to do it.
Yeah.
And I still think that Pat's language is inappropriate there. I'll make that on
Thank you
record.
very much for that comment. Yes, Gail.
Gail, I think you're being signaled to the microphone so we can record you.
We want to immortalize your comment in our video.
And I think when you use potential, it is an opinion. And that's why it's important to have a conflict of interest. And I don't want to loosen it, because once you loosen it, there's no more conflict. It should be tight. That's
So
all I
you're
want to
saying
say.
you want to keep the word
I
potential?
want to keep the word.
I see.
Yes. Because it's potential.
That's all I'm going to say. And people have opinions. I agree.
And I don't want to lose that.
I still want you to go to the lawyer with
I'll go to the lawyer with it.
it. Or you and wordsmith it, but it needs to
Well,
be dealt with.
Len's going to go to the lawyer with it.
We can go to the lawyer with it when we're ready.
You'll never get a policy manual.
Oh, come on.
You will. 2 years to write it, another 6
Okay.
years to get it passed.
Any other comments?
You'll have a new set of standards by then.
Hey, folks, we have a chance of
I
getting
think
out here
we're
before
right
11,
over for
almost.
consideration, right? I move that we put the policy manual consideration of section 1000 over to be pursued by the president of the board in respect of the comments from this evening.
Okay, I second it. Oh, Pat seconded it. Okay, all in favor of said motion? Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. I think we've come to that time when we
Magic time.
get to say sayonara, so do we have a motion to terminate the meeting?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. We're done, folks.